Okay, can you hear me? Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Um, my name is Lorenzo Pupillo. I am the head of cybersecurity at CEPS, and I welcome all of you to the second day of the Cybersecurity at CEPS Summit. Yesterday, we had a great start with three sessions. The opening session was opened by Kuba Boratinsky, and we had the opportunity to have an overview of the currently cybersecurity policy by the Commission. The focus was on the Cyber Resilience Act and the Cyber Unit. And quite a bit of the discussion was also on ransomware. Then we had Raji Samani from McAfee, and he focused, he made this interesting point regarding ransomware, that is not just the ransom, but the fact that these criminals are able to penetrate quite a bit in advance before asking the ransom in companies and institutions that they attack. And then we had a presentation from Deloitte with Jan and Martina, and they focus their attention on the impact of COVID-19 on cybersecurity, also a specific focus on small and medium enterprises. We had then two sessions, one on NIS2, they saw the convergence among the speaker on the boldness, on the ambition of the NIS2 proposal, and also a very specific but interesting session on software vulnerability disclosure that was able, to do an overview of the status of vulnerability disclosure policy in the EU. Today, we will start with an overview of the cybersecurity policy in the EU, but from the Council perspective. And we have with us, we are very pleased we have with us Stasia Novak, chair of the Horizontal Working Party on Cyber Issues of the Council, and she will, present what the Council during the Slovenia presidency has been doing on cybersecurity. Before giving the floor to her, I would like to remind some basic engagement rules. Please, unless you are one of the panelists, please keep switched off the video and the audio, and then you can send your comments or ask questions using the chat. The whole meeting will be live streamed on CEPS YouTube channel. Okay, so I think we can start giving the floor to Stasia. Stasia, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, very well.
Thank you. So first, thank you, Lorenzo, for inviting me to speak today. It's really a pleasure to provide an insight into the cyber work of the Council of the European Union under Slovenian presidency. COVID pandemic, its impact on our lives, economies, and society has significantly impacted also our presidency. And the motto we have chosen for the presidency is Together Resilient Europe. And we have been working together with all other 26 member states and numerous other stakeholders, including EU institutions, bodies, and agencies, and partners, as well as private sector, on strengthening our resilience. including cyber resilience and our readiness to respond to future crises. And allow me to mention some of the initiatives that kept us busy in these past few months. At the forefront of our work is, of course, the review of the NIS directive. And yesterday you had a dedicated session on this topic, and I will not go into substance now, but I would like to stress that we are extremely grateful that we managed to work out a compromise proposal that enjoys support by the member states in order for us to submit this proposal for the adoption of the general approach at the Telecom Council this Friday, so tomorrow, December 3rd. NIS directive is really a major step, NIS 2 directive is a major step forward in ensuring a greater level of cybersecurity and resilience in the Union. And we had intensive discussions in the Council, starting already with the Portuguese presidency. And while we all understand that how important it is to be ambitious in cyber, to invest and increase and increase the European cyber resilience, including by significantly broadening the scope of the directive, it was also important for us to find the solution that is implementable in practice. So a solution that is proportional in terms of resources and administrative burden, and based on greater level of risk management. And from the perspective of cyber crisis management, our priority was to promote the work on an updated and more comprehensive European cyber crisis management framework. And following the publication of the Commission recommendation on the Joint Cyber Unit in June 21, the Council responded with Council conclusions on the 19th of October. These conclusions are an expression of a clear and strong commitment of the Council and EU member states to enhance our efforts towards more comprehensive and effective EU cybersecurity crisis management framework, which builds on the existing mechanisms and networks and progress already achieved, while also taking into account and into consideration the potential of this joint cyber unit initiative. As the first step in this process, we decided that due attention shall be given to mapping out possible information sharing gaps and needs within and across cyber communities of member states, but also in institutions, bodies, and agencies. When I'm talking about cyber communities, these are cybersecurity, law enforcement, cyber diplomacy, and cyber defense. And information sharing is key to our common situational awareness and therefore instrumental for timely decision-making in a crisis. Up until now, so Council and Member States, we have been working on the implementation of these conclusions together with institutions, bodies, and agencies. Personally, I have to say that what is the most amazing step forward is the dialogue. So new connections that have been established so far within and across communities, which is inevitably bringing us closer together, strengthening the necessary trust, and establishing a good basis for the next more concrete and operational steps under the incoming French presidency. Here, I would also like to stress the importance of exercises. We had one at the working level of the Horizontal Working Party on Cyber Issues, which I'm chairing, in mid-November, and we were focusing on cyber diplomacy toolbox implementation. So a set of tools for a joint EU diplomatic response to prevent, discourage, deter, and respond to malicious cyber activities. This exercise provided a venue for a better situational awareness and information exchange within and across communities. So what I mean, we had, for example, European External Action Service, Commission, agencies such as ENISA, Europol, and also European Defense Agency there with us. And we even managed to have NATO as an observer to this exercise. And talking about cyber diplomacy, I would also like to draw your attention to the external aspects of cyber. So a topic which you will discuss also during this afternoon and it's of utmost importance when we speak about resilience and stability in cyberspace. During our presidency, we had so far 2 declarations by the High Representative on behalf of the European Union, one on Microsoft Exchange servers, urging Chinese authorities to take action against malicious cyber activities undertaken from its territory, and in July, and another one on respect for the EU democratic processes in response to Ghostwriter in September. And these are important expressions of EU commitment to the norms of responsible state behavior to ensure global, open, free, stable, and secure cyberspace. And they go also hand in hand with cyber dialogues, so mechanisms of common foreign security policy, which the EU has with some partner countries and third countries, and continuous consultations which we do with like-minded partners, as well as outreach activities we are regularly conducting with third countries on several topics of European interest. Moreover, we have been actively engaged as the European Union also in the ongoing UN processes. So in this year, we had 2 remarkable achievements at the UN level, 2 consensus reports from the open-ended working group and group of governmental experts. And an important message from them is this consensual reaffirmation of the UN Framework for Responsible State Behavior in Cyberspace, which is building on the application of international law and the 11 norms of responsible state behavior, as well as the message of the importance of cyber capacity building and confidence building measures. And together with the other co-sponsors of the program of action, the EU is already working hard to advance responsible state behavior in cyberspace through sharing of best practices, dialogue, and cyber capacity building. And now we are just before the start of the first substantive session of the new open-ended working group, and before the first negotiating session for the new UN Convention on Cybercrime. So this being said, there is important work ahead at the global level, not just at the level of the United Nations, but also in other fora such as the ITU, and European Union has an important role to play in this regard. And we expect that EU coordination and active engagement will continue also under the next presidencies. And I have mentioned cyber capacity building, and let me briefly expand on this as well. This is an important element of building practical foundation to implement the UN framework of responsible state behavior and also to increase cyber resilience. From the EU perspective, a lot has been done in this field as well in the recent months. During our presidency, we have put a lot of attention on the partnership with Western Balkans, priority area of focus also in the December 2020 EU cybersecurity strategy. And our aim was to foster more action-oriented, more unified, internally coordinated and strategic approach of the European Union towards the Western Balkans. So we held dedicated sessions in the working party on this topic. We had conference in September dedicated to this, as well as there was an important message that was sent at the Western Balkans EU Summit in October, calling for more cooperation on cyber. In addition to this, we also continued the work that started with the Portuguese presidency on Africa, promoting inclusive and resilient digital transformation in Africa, including more emphasis on cooperation on cyber, also among the African Union and European Union, which will hopefully feature also in the upcoming summit next year. And we held events related to the Eastern Partnership and cyber as well. So to conclude, These are just some of the areas that we have been focusing on in the past few months under our presidency slogan, Together Resilient Europe. And building resilience to the challenges we are facing today in cyber, which includes also a broader framework of geopolitical tensions, including the attempts to control and abuse new technologies, requires really vigilance in several fields of work at the EU level. In the area of cybersecurity regulation, certification standards, as well as in the areas of investments into new technologies and operational capabilities, into improving our cyber crisis management procedures, and last but not least, also more vigilance and activities in the areas of policies, so norms and rules, and as well as international cooperation and multilateralism, so including engagement with multiple stakeholders. And topics which are reflected also at the agenda of this summit, and which I really highly appreciate. And let me stop here. Many thanks for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Stasha, for your comprehensive presentation of the activity of the Council. And this is all very interesting food for thought, especially for the last session today panel, that we look more at the how good are the current norms, if we need additional norms, and so on. I have some questions, but we prefer to give the floor to the other speakers, and then we will have the Q&A section. Okay, so stay with us. Now I would like to give the floor to Jérôme Billois, a partner of cybersecurity practice of Waveston. Jérôme, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Hello, everyone. So, as Lorenzo said, I'm Jérôme Billois. I'm partner within Wavestone. We're a consulting company, and with a large team of people working in cyber, 600 people globally. And as we were talking just before on more the global issue at European level, I will put me in the eyes of a CISO that works with large companies, within the large companies, because it's the field I know the most, to share with you what we think are the most important topic for next year. So I'm going to use a few slides very quickly just to give you a sense of what we are seeing right now in the field, and what should be for us the major trends for 2022 for, as I said, large organization, whether public or private. A few figures to start with. What we have seen in the field with our incident response team last year is still a very strong imbalance between attack and defense. If we look at on the attack side, there is an average delay of 25 days between the intrusion and the encryption for the ransomware attack. It went down to 3 days for one of our clients, 3 days only between the first intrusion and the successful encryption of the information system. And at the same time, we are seeing that still 57 of these attacks are opportunistic, meaning they are just looking for low-hanging fruits, easy company to break in and to make money. That's for the attack side. If we look at the defense side, the situation is still complex, still difficult. The average delay to detect an attack, whatever type it is 52 days. So it's still very long. I have to say that we are seeing an improvement on that field. Last year, it was 94 days, and 3 years ago, it was 150 days. So companies, they are investing a lot in their ability to detect and respond to cyber attack, but still, we are going slowly compared to the attackers. And we still have 10% of the attacks that are reported by a third party, so not detected internally, but detected by clients, customers, authorities, or even journalists. And regarding the impact, the consequences are very heterogeneous. Last year, when dealing with ransomware attacks, we had an average crisis length of 2 weeks, from the day one of the attack up to when the information system was back online. I would say 70–80% of the information system was online. Maybe not working very well, but at least working sufficiently to restart most of the business processes. So it's a 2 weeks delay, and it's very long. And on the other side, we are seeing teams to manage this crisis that could be huge. Here, the maximum number of people involved was 200. So you have, in that kind of situation, to cope with a lot of logistical issues that need to be prepared beforehand, such as how to cater for 200 people, where the people are going to sleep, and how we are going to organize the work very efficiently. And all these crisis management aspects are yet to be improved in many of the clients we worked with. And if we work on that, we could shorten this 2 weeks delay and make sure that the company is able to come back online much more quickly. So that's the picture of what we have been seeing last year. And now if we look at the 2022 cyber trends, it's important first to look at the external factors. The factors that the CISO cannot really act on, cannot really change the situation. He has to adapt to it, but it could be very complex, but interesting to work on it. I think the first external factor is really that the data is and will be everywhere. We're talking about digital transformation for the last 10 years. Now we are fully in that digital transformation. The COVID really sped up a lot of things. And the situation right now is, as a CISO, when you want to secure your data and your system, they are not anymore within the perimeter of the enterprise. They are really everywhere, with partners, with suppliers, within the cloud, in different countries. And so it's very complex to have a map and a knowledge of where everything is. This has been discussed a little bit yesterday, but you have also the digital transformation of the cybercrime. Cyber criminals, they really succeeded in their digital transformation. They now have platforms with affiliates. They go very fast. You have a different business model, pay-as-you-go, a rental of the tools, and things that make the cybercrime much more efficient and that enable the cybercrime to go at scale. And that's we have witnessed over the last 2–3 years. It's really they are able to enlarge their scope of actions. Then we have something very difficult to manage for a large organization. It's the internet and the technology segregation that is coming up right now with national clouds, with sovereignty issues, with a lot of new regulations that force companies and public organizations to store the data within specific regional perimeters. And this is complex to manage when you are a large organization, because you want to have a streamlined information system that you can easily manage, easily keep up to date, and easily detect the attack on it. And when you have multiple information systems in multiple geographies using multiple technologies, it's much more difficult to manage. That was maybe the difficult external factors. If you look maybe at the more positive external factors, we can say now that the cyber is much more understood at the executive levels. The doors are opened. Last year, I've seen many boards asking questions, making sure that actions are being done within their perimeters. And we are seeing much more investment within large organizations on cyber. So that is a very good point. It's also a challenge for the CISO, because he has to live up to the expectation of these people, but it's very good news. What we are seeing as well, and we were talking about that just before, is that the states, the police forces, the regulators, they are also the new allies of the CISO. We are seeing many new regulations coming in action, and we are really really witnessing a strong push from the police forces and the judiciary systems to fight cybercrime. I'm sure you have seen all these arrests this year, Emotet, Reveal, and Clop, and most of the most active groups have been either arrested or disrupted by action from the police forces. So that is also very good news. And I think maybe the most important thing for cyber as it is going on is that cyber is seen more and more as a business differentiator. I think a company like Apple did it for now a few years. You know, you have all seen these ads about the respect of the confidentiality, the private life, and so on and so forth. And it helps making at the general public the sense of cyber is important, and maybe I should take cyber as a criteria when I buy something. And maybe it's not cyber, maybe it's confidentiality or privacy, because cyber may not be a large public world. But anyway, we are seeing even in the B2B world, a lot of questions about the cybersecurity. When you buy services, when you buy connected objects, when you buy new IT systems or even new business systems. And that is a chance for the CISO to change his posture or her posture. You know, cyber has long been seen as a cost for the companies, for the large organization. And now cyber could be seen as maybe a way to more easily win large bids, or even for some industries as new services to sell. And this is very important. And this could be a lever to change the image of cyber. Taking into account all of these externalities, there are things that CISO have to do in the coming years. There are many projects around these topics here. Resilience, for sure, to be able to sustain attacks and to keep working while the attack is ongoing, both at the business and the tech level. Another hot topic will be third-party security. As the company is getting more and more secure, the attackers, they go through the partners, the suppliers of the companies. And there is also this issue with product security. Product security, we discussed it just before, it could be a differentiator if you secure properly your products. It could be also an assurance to make sure that what you are using or what you are selling is compliant and will not be a future source of issue. And these are quite large topics, new topics, and topics that need to be worked in depth. When you talk about resilience, if you need to see all the businesses, it's a wide topic. Third-party securities, we are talking about tens, hundreds, and even thousands of suppliers. And product security, it's also a question of many different products that are on the market. And then we have maybe more IT tech topics. Zero trust, you know, this philosophy to make sure that every time you will exchange data between people, between systems, you will check for the trust level, for the identity, for the conformity, for the localization of the systems. And this is a big change in the way we designed the cybersecurity for the last 10, 20 years. But it's really a good way to go to cope with this concept of extended enterprise and the fact that data will be everywhere. Next technological topic is the confidential computing. To be able to use securely data in cloud environments, to live up to the challenges around encryption, and to be able, to use tech such as the homomorphic encryption, meaning that you are able to send encrypted data in a cloud system. The cloud system will work on this data without decrypting it. and they will send you back a result that is still encrypted, and you and only you on your system will be able to decrypt it. These are very advanced technologies and research projects right now, but it could be a way to release the brakes for many cloud projects if these technology are efficient enough. Last but not least on the technological project is everything related to AI and automation. We know that we need to go quicker than the attackers. We need to also defend a very large perimeter. And all this, at some point, will require automation. Human people won't be able to cope with the speed of the attacks, with the number of systems, and the teams could be helped by having systems that would do the heavy lifting, and so they could concentrate on the more advanced topics. And last but not least, for sure, I think the main topic for CISO and people in cyber in the coming years will be HR, human resources. We know that there is a strong lack of skills on the market right now, and the threat is not going to come down anytime soon. So we are in a difficult situation, and we need to rethink the way we see HR in cyber, both at the attractivity level. This is a topic that needs to be taken at state level for sure, but it also could be taken at the enterprise or the organizational level, making sure that you are in the good place to recruit people, that you are writing job description the good way, that you are making your project attractive for external people, but also for your team, the existing team, making sure that you work on the retention, meaning working on their career paths, looking at the compensation packages, thinking about how to attract internally within the company to have internal mobility, and indeed to think about diversity. We know that cyber is mostly cyber jobs are mostly taken by male, and I think female people would really help to cope with all these challenges we have, and that could be only a very good solution to open the way we recruit, open the way we attract people to these cyber topics. So HR is really the main challenge, I think, for cyber in the years to come. And that's it for me.
Okay, Jérôme, thank you very much for your broad presentation. Although this year you did presenting dragons, disappoint me a little bit.
Next year, I will put dragons in the presentation, Lorenzo, just for you.
Yeah, a dragon, ransomware dragon, maybe, I don't know. Yeah. So now we'll move again, we'll go for question after the third speaker. Now, as third speaker, we are very pleased to have with us this a new entry in the CEPS, let's say, ecosystem. Pedro Norton Barbosa is the CEO of Multicert and the cybersecurity director of CEPS. It's a payment system company. So Pedro, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, Lorenzo. Thank you very much, and good morning, all. I'm going to share also the industry view according to our experience. Let me see if I can share screen. Okay. In a minute. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, so my presentation is through our industry view of the current challenges that, of course, most of them have been talked a lot about in these last sessions today and yesterday, and also what we view as the future, near midterm future, in terms of how the market is going and what are the challenges and opportunities. So starting by a topic that was already mentioned, the attack surface increased a lot since the pandemic. So the work from home and the accelerated digital transformation made just for the business continuity, that we needed to have a different view on how we secure the networks, the assets that we protect for our partners and customers. In fact, over the last years, I think it's many companies that I faced, they didn't know what were their assets, and the number of IPs, the domains, the subdomains, what is exposed, what is not exposed, and all the applications, all the servers, all having these collected. So we need to have a big effort to classify and have an up-to-date picture of what we have as assets. Why? Because we cannot protect what we don't know. And for instance, from some years now, many companies and organizations, they don't know what are their IPs and other assets. I think this is have increased a lot because we now have networks of networks, and as we've been discussing, this needs a different approach. I think on this part, as we are seeing, and with the trends that with the ENISA reports as well, we are seeing that also the endpoints are one of the main entries into a network. So, and people, when they are away, they are more isolated, and they can be quickly distracted, and one bad decision could make your network being compromised. And with just a single point of entry, then what we are seeing, and the numbers expressed, they are being lowering year after year, but dozens of days with intrusions in a network, there's a lot of illegal activities to be done, and bad activities for a company. So I think that attack surface management is really a challenge nowadays. As Jerome said, I think 8 years ago, we had already this cybersecurity skills gap. So it's for to work in this area, you really need experience, and you really need a broad view of all the security fields, or many of them, and this takes time. And I think, as we all think, that the academy is getting more and more resources, but the acceleration is faster and faster. And I think it will be, we won't solve this, and we have to find ways to address these challenges, taking consideration the cybersecurity skills gap. We talked a lot, and I think that one of the main threats nowadays is ransomware and ransomware as a service. And this relates also to cybercrime as a service. I remember since 2006, I've been working a lot in email security. And so there were cybercrime as a service since 2008, 2010, to send spam, a lot of spam. And at that time, you could hire a botnet, you could hire someone to create the templates for you. You could hire these pieces and you can then launch your attack without being a full expert on every piece that you need for the attack. What we are observing nowadays is that this has evolved a lot. And of course, cyber criminals are making a lot of money with this type of attacks. So it's been years that they are working here, and this black economy is getting more and more evolved. Some of the criminal groups, they work like authentic organizations with structures to attack, and as yesterday was mentioned, they have the labor is scheduled, and they work 9 to 5, and they have the objectives, and they have to make money. So this has evolved a lot, and I think one of the main issues here is that if you look at these groups, they have dispersed operations in several parts of the world. So it's very difficult nowadays, and we know that we have the Convention on Cybercrime, and but it's been hard, very hard for countries to cooperate, because they have cyber criminals, they have call centers in Philippines, they have money mules in local countries, they have the other groups that create the malwares and the payloads. So it's quite complex to combat even nowadays, although we have seen with successful operations that are happening more and more due to also more collaboration. I won't speak a lot about third-party risks, because we've talked a lot about this, but of course third-party risks, and it needs a clear look on this, and of course Dora will also help a lot for the financial institutions and all the third-party providers. And sharing and collaboration, we believe it's still at low levels. We've been talking a lot about collaboration for many years. And what we observe is that the collaboration there's still not so much trust in our experience, in companies. We still reside much on people that we know and that we trust, but we are seeing good efforts on here, and we are seeing some key initiatives here taking place between companies, and some of them are implementing MISP instances also to federate the instances and to share IOCs, because they're having more trust. And I think this, as we discussed before, will be key to tackle these threats in a timely manner. For the SMEs, I think there's a lot of lack of awareness. I've been facing from time to time complete disasters in small companies, because they are not prepared and they are not resilient as well. And so here I think that the governments are making an effort, and we need a lot of work to do here. So looking ahead, So more regulation, more active partners in the ecosystem, as Jerome said, this will be very, very good to address all the threats that we are facing. Going back to the cybersecurity skills gap, AI, automation, and orchestration they are playing, they are relevant right now. They will be more and more relevant. If you look at any device that has software and is connected to the internet, it's vulnerable. So we are seeing an explosion of events that need to be analyzed, and it's impossible to look at this explosion of events without the help of technology to have better responses, to have better detections, to have better decisions, to have automation, to be faster. And we see a lot of critical infrastructures already looking at automation and orchestration. AI is also playing, is very relevant nowadays, and it will be more in more and more in the future. So I think that here we have really to look at this seriously, because it's very complex with this explosion of events and devices connected. Cyber, in fact, and I totally agree with Jerome, will be a business differentiator. We are seeing, for instance, solutions that we have that if we need to have more security measures, we have to pay more, and we pay more for that. So, and this is only one example of being a business differentiator, but companies will look for partners and providers also that could provide this differentiation and can prove this differentiation. I see also that well, in my experience, there's a gap in large companies in understanding the investments that are made in technologies, processes, and people, and if they are currently with secure or with standard levels of security and with the risk addressed. And there's a huge gap that we see here, and cyber risk quantification is still emerging, so the models are becoming more solid over the years, but there's still a long way to go. But if we can go and to the end, to the losses, and understand what is the exposure quantified, and what we need to invest in which controls, and what we need to transfer the risk for a cyber insurance, I think this should be probably an area for large organizations and critical infrastructures to look at it, to ease the communication between CISOs and the boards. And again, more collaboration, more collaboration, more collaboration. We are talking 4 years on collaboration, and I've been participating in some international groups where we see a lot of success in collaboration between industry, academy, and law enforcement, and it produces great results. I will end up with one collaboration that we had this year in phishing that were targeting one of the brands that we were protecting. And so these phishing campaigns do 6 months, 73 phishing campaigns, and I would say a lot of email templates used, to improve results. So we were measuring and taking all the steps necessary to be fast, to protect the company and the brands that we are protecting. And so over the 6 years, so this represents the phishing campaigns that were sent and the domains that were created and were taken down on this over these months. And on the site takedowns, we started with some collaborations to install probes at some service providers that we could, with some heuristic rules, detect phishing campaigns being launched in the early seconds. So, and we started to collect more and more indicators from the threat groups that were being launching these campaigns. And fortunately, this led to the arrest of 2 people in April. And we were very successful at neutralizing all these phishing campaigns. And we can take it at more broader level, because and with the use of AI, we can apply successful techniques that could have successful results and protect many more companies and organizations. So again, I will end up collaboration is key. We can do and we can have great results here. So I will end up here, Lorenzo, back to you, and thank you very much for the time for presenting our view.
Thanks, Pedro, for your very vibrant, call for, cyber differentiation and your, strong commitment as company to cybersecurity. And now I would like to open, the Q&A session, and we can start maybe with some comment among the 3 speakers, and then maybe go to the audience. Okay. So I don't know if Stasha or Jerome or Pedro want to have a question for the speakers. Otherwise we will go to the audience.
Let me jump in. I wouldn't
Yes.
have a question, but I would really say that I appreciate the inputs that were provided, because it gives really the perspective of the industry and CISOs so into what's relevant and what are the questions in practice. I know that this directive won't solve all of them. It's not meant to be, but it's addressing some of them. So it was just to say that it was highly appreciated to have this inputs. So with these 2, let's say we are addressing the low-hanging fruits. So maybe to strengthen the overall resilience at a bit more horizontal level across more sectors than before. So that's a step forward. Also in terms of increasing requirements for reporting. So there's a bit more elements to it. But and also in terms of promoting further investments into cybersecurity, ensuring higher level of management board involvement into cyber. So it's encouraging to see the trends that are moving in the right direction, but there will be still some work to do. So when I was listening to it, I identified some further areas of work, basically. So many thanks for that.
Well, maybe I can jump in if there are no questions at the moment. I have a couple of questions for Stasha and one also for Jerome and Pedro. Okay, for Stasha. The first one is, Stasha, you put a lot of emphasis on the cyber diplomacy activity. Okay. How do you see, this effectiveness of this activity when we come to ransomware? In other words, ransomware to some extent, it's in many cases it's generated by the, let's say, individual criminals that are harbored by a nation state, but it's an individual initiatives. And apparently, there have been some initiative like talks between Putin and Biden at the meeting in Geneva, and then the White House launched this coalition. They have this meeting, online meeting at the White House, to start this coalition on ransomware. But how do you think are these? How effective are these initiatives? And then the second question for Stasha, it's related more. You mentioned the revision of the Cybercrime Convention. I want to tie this to the issue of software vulnerability disclosure, because we know that one of the issues with software vulnerability disclosure is lack of legal certainty, okay, in Europe especially. And, the Cybercrime Convention clearly states that, unauthorized access to computer system, it's a crime. But, it's not clear to some extent. Let's say, we've done some research also with ENISA on the state of play of vulnerability disclosure. And we find that some countries, like for instance, Belgium, they are leading, now the practice on software vulnerability disclosure. They mentioned that, the fact that only unauthorized access means that if you publish CVD policy, you are authorized even under, you don't break, the Cybercrime Convention. So probably in the revision, this issue should be made more clear. So I want to see, your view on that.
Thank you, Lorenzo. These are difficult questions. When about the ransomware, of course, there is an element where there is a link to state actors that is of interest also when we are dealing when we are talking about cyber diplomacy. I have to mention that the initiative on ransomware initiative that you have mentioned, initiated by the United States. There were meetings in October where also European Union co-signed that initiative. And it's so we have been discussing these elements, and it's something that is at our radar, let's put it like that, and in our discussions. There is, of course, a recognized need that we need to cooperate more to improve. There are several elements to this work. First, they relate to the improvement of network resilience, what we are doing to prevent the incidents. Part of our work relates then to the NIS directive. But then there is also elements of cooperation addressing the abuse of financial mechanisms to launder ransomware payments or for other activities. And then there are also elements of law enforcement cooperation. So it's something that is important to address, and we have been addressing it in the Council, but I think we will continue to do so also in the future to see how we can bring this forward. On the new UN Cybercrime Convention. There is one question, the work on that convention, which is now focused really on defining the scope and objectives of this UN convention. So we don't know what's going to be in that convention yet. In January, we'll have the first session on that. So then it will be a bit more clear what we are talking about. And then we will see how to address this. But we have, as you know, also in NIS directive, important legal basis for the European work on the coordinated vulnerability disclosure on this. There we also addressed these parts. Well, member states now will be obliged to include in their national policies also policies on coordinated vulnerability disclosure. And there we had these discussions about the criminal liability linked to it. So we are encouraged, it's not something that we can solve, of course, with NIS directive, but at least we included some elements into it that member states have to address also these issues, because it's a bit a complex situation. So let's say it like that. We are at the European level with this, we are addressing it, making first steps, encouraging member states that we will have to address it at the national level. What will be in the UN Convention, this is something to be seen for the future. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the question that I want to ask to both to Pedro and to Jerome is, you mentioned the importance of cyber as a differentiator. Okay, the problem is that many analyses say that consumers, while are able and they are willing to spend money for, let's put it this way, like the shape of a phone, the color, they are not able, to, let's say, the average consumer, to understand, to pay for the security, because they are unable to understand if, let's say, one product is more secure than another. Okay, this is a basic market failure. There is like an asymmetric information basically between the producer of product and the consumer. It is also to some extent as the counter effect that because build sometimes like to build a more secure product cost, and if this cost cannot be recouped to some extent by the final price, manufacturers do not build secure product. So there are policies designing, some thinking about ad hoc measure. There are, for instance, labeling, certification, or, yesterday we talked about, for instance, the possibility, that the Cyber Resilience Act will consider horizontal regulation, like to establish some minimum set of requirements, to say this product is secure by default because follow some requirement. Okay, what is your view on that? What will be, in your view, make more, on the consumer side, more viable this idea of selling, being able to sell the safety of products?
Maybe to start with, I think you are really right in splitting the issue in two different parts, because there are the B2B buying, and for that, cyber criteria could be much more understood and evaluated in the answer. It's still a complex topic, because the same issue that we see that people are not willing to pay in the B2C world appears also in the B2B world, but I think we have levers to do it, to improve the situation. If we look at the B2C world, I think the main difficult part here is that people does not know, and it's very difficult to identify what is a secure product or a non-secure product. Because if you look at another industry, the auto industry, now the safety of a car is a main criteria for buying it. And there are these Euro NCAP stars, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars. And if you buy a car, you look at, is it a safe car? And I think the auto industry made a big change. If you look in the 70s, the main criteria was the speed of the car, and now it's the safety of the car. And I think we should go the same way with cyber. And there are solutions here. I can talk about something that happened 2 days ago in France. There are new law propositions to add a cyber score to digital services, and this I think could be extended as well to digital products. To have like a score A, B, C, D, E, or maybe based on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars for cybersecurity criteria, for the people to be for all the consumer to easily evaluate the security level of a digital services or maybe in the future of a digital product. And this, we need that to make it a large public topic. Otherwise, it will stay a technical product where only cyber experts can find the differences, and discuss for ages on what is better than that, and so on and so forth. But we need to create something new and to create something simple for the general public to be able to evaluate the cybersecurity of services and products.
Jerome, but this will be mandatory or will be only, it's a voluntary measure?
It's in discussion, so it's not finished, but the idea is to make it mandatory. We've made a same movement in France on the food, and it has been a very hard fight for the last 4 or 5 years, something like that, to have this Nutri-score, as we call it, for nutriments, the quality of the food. So I'm not sure it's mandatory for the food, but the goal is to make it mandatory for the digital services.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pedro, your view on that?
Yeah, I would take also. So I agree with Jerome. So from the B2C side, yes, there's not awareness, and it's not easy to understand what is a secure product than cheaper product that doesn't have security. And here, definitely regulation will be key. And I didn't know about this initiative of classifying, but it makes all the sense. If you look today, one of the biggest threats, and there's a rise in the trends in the last ENISA report with DDoS, distributed denial of services. They are using more and more IoTs, so devices like routers, webcams, and so on, that are not secure, that are easily exploitable. And if you gather the control of thousands, hundreds of thousands or millions, it could produce a lot of damage in economies. So in our homes, we might be participating in cyber attacks, and we don't know. We don't know for sure. And it also happens with smart TVs, with all the IoTs that we are using more and more. So here, there should be, enforcement of security by design, of how to translate this to common people. It's not easy to understand what is a secure product or not if they bring admin passwords and credentials by default and hardened in the systems, which is it happened a lot in the last years. And so here I think this should be also through regulation and through translating more about how people understand and be aware of using secure products. From the B2B side, which is more on our experience and now also related with third-party risks, I think that the security ratings are playing really a key role here. So you can look at providers, small, freelancer, large companies, and see the ratings. And the ratings, the security ratings, we should be careful at looking and interpreting security ratings, because a good rating doesn't mean that the company is really secure or at good levels of security. But a bad rating means that you, in fact, you need to do, and you need to take measures to improve your security posture, to do business with other companies. But again, I think that here, so there should be, and it will be, regulation on both parts of the business, but also awareness, how to translate, and the challenge, how to translate the complexities of cybersecurity to a general audience, to understand if the products and services are secure or not.
Okay, thanks, Pedro. Does anybody want to ask question for the panelists? Maybe I can just last question from the panel from my side. It would be to each of you. Both Pedro and Jerome mentioned, the issue of lack of skills, and I would like to ask to all of you, and especially the issue, of increasing, of the gender gap, on this, on the cybersecurity skill. What you would like to propose, to try to overcome this skill gap? I will start with Stasha.
This is like $1 million question. No, it's really difficult. I think besides calling upon everyone to promote and greater inclusiveness and of course gender equality in cyber and in development of skills, education, training. I don't know how to do. I don't have a solution for that. It's except to continue to promote that. I will have to pass on this one.
Jerome?
Yes, it's a very hard question. And I think it is a question that must be addressed more largely than just for cyber. It's an issue at the STEM level, and all the digital skills we are missing, and there is an imbalance regarding gender for nearly all the digital jobs. And so it has to be taken, I think, at the roots, and at school, even first grade, second grade, high school, and universities, to change the mindset that digital topics are for men, and this should be this will be for sure a long way to change that. But I'm quite relieved that when you see a younger generation, I think it's already changing. I have kids and children in my environment, and I see that we are not seeing things like when I was at school, where there were a strong differentiation. Okay, if you want to do something technical, you need to be a boy, otherwise, and so on and so forth. And so I think the global society is changing on that. And so we need to push at all levels to make sure that it's going to change. In France, there has been a lot of initiative around opening new trainings and schools around the cyber topic. And the main issue we have today is that these promotion, these schools, they are not full. Often they are half full. There are only 50-60% of the seats that are taken, and even for men and women. So it's also a question of making the cyber topic attractive. So we need to make the digital topic attractive for everyone, and the cyber topic attractive also. So it's going to be a long way.
Okay, Pedro, your view?
Yeah. So I think from the awareness side, the topics should start to be introduced at school and university for what are the threats, how to use the data, create more awareness. This is from one side because people, they don't know in general what are the threats that they are facing. If you look at this explosion of data, means that we see nowadays, it's impressive of what we can do with this data, with the data breaches over the years. It's an area of huge interest, that is identity intelligence, that is used with successfully with law enforcement and other agencies in de-anonymizing people behind frauds and so on. And it's a very, very interesting area, and this relates to all the exposition of data. So I think it starts by creating this awareness, and we should have more initiatives on this at schools and universities. I've seen also some friends of mine in other different areas that are starting to have cybersecurity and how to protect medical information and in other areas as well. In terms of careers and how can we produce much more resources to address the challenges. I think the industry is working and running at a faster pace. So let me say, I think that cybersecurity is really a hot topic, and I think it's attractive, but it's very complex. And I would say that one of the initiatives is, and we are seeing some quite good initiatives here, is to work also on technical degrees also that are more focused, but can produce more resources for specific tasks. And because, of course, being quite proficient in all these security areas, it takes time. It takes a lot of time, and the industry is running faster. So again, I think here artificial intelligence and others will also be side to side with here and helping address this challenge.
Okay, thank you very much, Pedro. Thank you to all the keynote speakers for this interesting session. And now we will move to the second part of the day, and we'll start our session on quantum computing and cybersecurity, opportunities and challenges. We have a great panel here. We have Professor Wolfgang Tieter, Isaac Cohn from Deloitte, Pascal Melot, Deputy Head of Unit High Performance Computing in the European Commission.
Hi.
Are you, all of you are there, are here? So you can put your camera on so we can see all of you. Okay, Wolfgang. Okay, great. Okay, good. Unfortunately, I have to say that this morning, you know, when I woke up, I saw a message from Professor Tadeo that she's sick and she cannot participate this morning. So all of us will try to to maybe to play the role of philosopher. I will try to, but we'll try to compensate, Professor Taddeo's view on some of the issues that she was going to cover. Maybe Pascal, like the policy and the ethical issues. I'm particularly proud of being able to put together this session because in each forum or in each cyber summit, we always devote one session to more forward-looking issue. Last year was artificial intelligence. Then also we were able to present some of the results of our task force on AI and cybersecurity. It was really successful with this task force with about 18 companies, 80 institutions, the academics, civil society, and so on. And this time I thought, this year was the right time to start talking about quantum computing and cybersecurity, and looking at the opportunities and challenges. Why is that? Because, quantum computing is often presented as a fantastical technology associated with science fiction. But, to use the expression the philosopher Thomas Kuhn in The Structure of Scientific Revolution, probably we can say that quantum computing represents a paradigm shift in computation. I will leave to Wolfgang, to explain why it's that. But basically, the basic idea that quantum computing enables certain calculation with much quicker than possible with traditional computer. This is opening a trove of application, of rich application, that cannot be solved at the moment or are very difficult to solve with the current computing factoring capabilities. We are talking about, for instance, using molecular simulation to improve electrical vehicle batteries, climate and weather modeling, behavioral analytics, optimize traffic flow in a city, enhance generative models that build data set for training, better machine learning algorithm, but also decrypt data security, public key encryption. However, the downside to some extent of quantum computing is the possibility of breaking current public key cryptography, and this remains one of the most challenging issues. Although the risk to current encryption standard is likely over a decade away, the implication for national security, civilian communication, and storage data are very significant. So for this reason, we would like with this session first to understand, what quantum computing is, what is the status, and what are the open challenges for, for research, but also for what is the impact on the business, and also what are the policy critical issues need to be addressed. So I would like to start giving the floor to Wolfgang, to Professor Wolfgang Titel, Professor of QTech and Kevin Institute of Nanoscience at Delft University in the Netherlands, and also visiting professor University of Geneva and Schaffhausen Institute of Technology in Geneva. Wolfgang, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lorenzo. I prepared
Of course,
some
you can
slides,
take also more time, because Maria Rosaria is not here, so we'll try to
That is
compensate
great.
that. Yeah.
I did prepare some slides, but right now my computer asked for a special access. So we're in a crypto conference that was probably meant to happen.
If you want to, we can share for you this.
If you have them, maybe you can share them. That would be appreciated.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Lorenzo. We go on. Yeah, great. All right. Good morning, everybody. Lorenzo, thanks a lot for inviting me to come to this panel. Thanks a lot for introducing me. Well, you have mentioned a lot of affiliations. This is because I am currently professor at QTech in Delft, but I'm visiting professor in Geneva, and that adds a few more affiliations to the slide. And with this, I think we can go to the next slide. As you have already indicated, I will focus on give you a little bit of background about quantum computing and quantum key distribution, quantum encryption, both presented in view of secure communications. I will stick mostly to the science and technology behind it, and I think that Pascal will talk a little bit more about what is happening currently in Europe, what is the vision about these technologies in Europe. So you're certainly all aware that our current computers, which I will refer to as classical computers, they are based on bits, some physical systems that can take on values 0 and 1, and that is what we use to calculate. But you may have heard as well that if you change this, if you go from bits to quantum bits, so these are physical systems that can not only take on zeros and ones, but also superpositions of zeros and ones. They can be 0 and 1 at the same time. And this whole paradigm of computing does change a lot. And it turns out there are certain mathematical algorithms, not all, but certain, that can be run exponentially faster than on any classical machine. And that, of course, this huge speed up gives us possibilities, or maybe also threats, creates threats that are really interesting from an academic point of view, but that also have huge impact for the real world, for the consumer world, for the encryption world in particular. And the most important development there is maybe Shor's algorithm. It was the first big important quantum algorithm that was discovered back in 1994, which allows prime factorization in polynomial time, while a standard algorithm that can run on today's machines is exponentially slower. Yeah, and this then, of course, presents a threat to RSA and elliptic curve crypto, which are the two current public key crypto systems that are used every day. Yeah. Now, if you think, or if I think 10 years ago, 10 years back, I found that interesting, but I wasn't particularly worried about it. I wasn't thinking it would ever happen. And this perception of quantum computing and what may happen even during my lifetime has changed completely over the last couple of years. And I think there are two main reasons why that is the case. And the reason number one, that is the huge advance in the academic, in the scientific world, where right now we are at a stage, or my colleagues are at a stage, where we can demonstrate a quantum advantage, or as we say sometimes, supremacy of quantum computing compared to classical computing. What that means is that certain or some quantum computers are nowadays able to calculate tasks that are not feasible in reasonable time to be calculated on a classical machine. Yeah, so we are already somewhere where we see a huge advantage. The things that are being calculated, the algorithms, are not necessarily useful right now. Yeah, it just shows there are certain things, a little bit artificial, that a quantum computer can do already exponentially faster than a classical one. And I think the first breakthrough there was in the end of 2019, I think in October, where Google announced having demonstrated for the first time quantum supremacy. And they indicate they have run a calculation in 200 seconds that they projected to take 10,000 years on a classical machine. Well, then there was a bit of an argument with other companies, and IBM then claimed, well, on one of their supercomputers, they should be able to run it actually in 2.5 days. So the advantage of the quantum encoding was still there, but maybe not as big as the classical encoding, but it clearly showed we are right now somewhere sitting at the cusp between proof of principle demonstrations of quantum computers and being able to actually show that they can do something better than the quantum computer. Yeah. Then 1 year later, at the end of 2020, there was the team from the University of Science and Technology in China who has created a photonic quantum computer that calculated the task that is related to a matrix operation. They used 76 photons and projected that the task that they needed 20 seconds for would have taken 600 million years on a classical computer. So there is clearly a quantum advantage, and they continued working on their quantum computer since that time. And the latest news just from a month ago is that they have increased the number of photons from 76 to 113, and that increased the speed up by another 10 orders of magnitude. Yeah, so this is really very impressive right now to see what is happening there. So as I said, this was based on photons. The demonstration by Google before, I think I didn't mention, was based on qubits represented by superconducting circuits. I would like to say as well, these demonstrations here, they were not taking into account any quantum error correction. Yeah, like in classical computing, we need to correct errors. This is difficult, but it turns out if the complication of the calculation is not too large, we can do it without error correction. This is called noisy intermediate quantum computing. But there was just one more presentation, one more publication this week from the team at the University of Innsbruck, who showed that for the first time, I think, they were able to generate a fault-tolerant quantum gate set, which means that is something one can build up right now on in order to make eventually more complicated computing. So clearly, science is advancing fast. We are at a stage where it's very interesting to observe what is going to happen. And it's very interesting to see that right now quantum computers can already outperform classical computers, even though it is still for tasks that are not useful. The other thing that has convinced me that it will eventually happen is the huge buy-in by industry. And they're all the big players in the classical world, like Google, Microsoft, IBM, Alibaba, who have important quantum computing activities, but there are also lots of startups who do the same thing. So a lot of more people, a lot of more money, and that of course drives the science. Lorenzo, can we change the slide?
Yes.
Yeah. So should we care? Yes, we should care already now, even though I think that if we encode a message today, it will not be decoded today. But people can record messages, and maybe they can decode a message in 5 years, and that may be too early. So we should care. We should think about how we improve our crypto systems. And one of the way how we can do it is based on quantum key distribution. Yeah, and this promises the possibility for information theoretic key distribution and information theoretic encryption by sending quantum sets of light over quantum channels, optical fibers, or to a satellite and back. And it turns out that type of encryption, that type of key distribution, can even withstand a powerful universal quantum computing. Now, where are we in terms of the state of the art? There are commercial systems that you can buy already for distances over a couple of tens, maybe 100 kilometers. These are point-to-point links. There are academic demonstrations over up to 500 kilometers of fiber, and also one between a satellite and an Earth link over 1,000 kilometers or so. People look into trusted node networks. If you want to go over longer distances, we have to make piecewise secure links using QKD. And then at certain nodes, the quantum key becomes classical, and then we distribute another quantum key. So with this, we can go over long distances. There's a huge network in China that's being developed right now. I think the biggest network outside China is in South Korea. There's actually ED-Contig, a company in Geneva, who has deployed that. That's 40 users or so. As I said, it is not all quantum. There are classical relay stations in between. The academic world, we are working heavily on replacing these classical relay stations by what we call quantum repeater technology. It's not quite there yet, but a lot of things are happening already and are going to happen over the next couple of years. And if I ask again that question, should we care? I think we should, because I think here there is a clear technology that is at a level where it is working reliably. I know that ED-Contig has real customers, for instance, so it's not just an academic system that works once and then we can make a nice publication out of it. These are systems that work. So I think we are at a stage where we should seriously consider deploying them massively, creating large-scale networks. It takes time to deploy them. It takes time to actually learn how to work with them. And at the same time, academia should and will continue developing the future of quantum computing and communication such that at some point we can really distribute secret keys over arbitrary long distances, and we can also use these networks for other computational tasks such as network quantum computing, blind quantum computing, or distributed quantum sensing. With this, I would stop here right now. Would like to stop here, give the word to whoever is the next speaker, and I hope we can discuss this a little bit more in detail afterwards.
Thanks, Wolfgang. So you mentioned, say, that we should care, but I would like, maybe to ask you why, in your opinion, and if should cybersecurity care about quantum computer? What is the interplay between, from a technical standpoint, in other words, in terms of timing, in terms of capabilities?
Yeah.
It's a threat, it's an opportunity, in your view, for cybersecurity?
Yeah. So quantum computing is clearly a threat to cybersecurity because we can break current encryption systems. That is something that better will not happen because we really rely on this. And the good thing is that quantum key distribution allows us to actually build a secure crypto system that remains secure even if we have an all-powerful quantum computer. Yeah, so it's not like we continue this game of trying to run away from code breakers and trying to make our systems more resilient. Here's a possibility to actually once forever create something that will last regardless the changes in computing. Yeah, I think that is important. So it is something that creates really strong forward security. I think we should care because it is a different way of encryption. We are also hearing, and I think you have talked about this during this conference, about post-quantum cryptography. Also a very interesting, very important approach. I think these two have to work together. And the reason for that is that number one, we have to make sure encryption and the secure communication as we know it will continue. And number two, if you think about the type of attack against one or the other system, they're very different. For post-quantum, you can do it remotely. It's a software-based attack. For key distribution, for quantum key distribution, you have to be physically there and really listen to photons that are being transmitted over optical fiber. And I think these different ways of encryption and the different securities taken together really make make an encryption system that we can trust in.
Okay, now, just, to warm up the discussion, you mentioned more than once that, there are some breakthroughs that are coming from China. Okay, so in terms of geopolitics, I mean, how do you think, I mean, if this, I mean, if we compare what's happening, then maybe, Paul can jump in maybe later on and offer also his view. But if we compare, like China, the US, and Europe, what's happening in terms of research, advancement, and so on?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I would say China has an edge right now compared to North America and also Europe. And the reason for that is that they have decided at the highest level to put quantum information technology really as a strategically important development. So they have really, since, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so, they have invested a lot of money. They have run huge programs where they try to attract also professors from European and North American countries to spend some time there to really form the next generation of researchers. And they're well organized. Yeah, so I think there is a different approach that has started a long time ago in China that had led to the fact that they were the first to demonstrate a quantum satellite. They have a network between Beijing and Shanghai over 2,500 kilometers or so. They have maybe right now the fastest quantum computers. There is a reason for that. It's organization, it is money, and it's simply that they've started earlier. This is happening right now also in Europe. This is happening also right now in the United States. But I think we are all catching up a little bit. I hope with good organization we will get there. One could also say, well, from a scientific point of view, of course, we would love to be the first to demonstrate something because then we can publish this in good journals, and that is important for academic people like me. If you just think about security, at some point, it doesn't really matter who was the first to implement a great network. At the end, what is required is that we have it for our own server, for our own use. So from that point of view, it is not too late. It's just we shouldn't stop doing it.
Okay, thanks. We'll come back to some of this issue later on, the Q&A answer question. Now I'd like to give the floor to Isa Kohn, Deloitte Quantum Security Practice Leader. And because, Wolfgang mentioned, the importance for the private sector, but, I would like to get your view on this issue. So we should care. Why the private sector should care about quantum computing, and what your view is on how the private sector is approaching these issues when we link quantum computer to cybersecurity in terms of threat, but also opportunity linked to the post-quantum computing.
Sure, happy to. Thanks very much, Lorenzo. So let me start by saying cybersecurity executives have a very distinct role and responsibility here to monitor the developments in quantum computing and assess what actions are appropriate for their organizations to take and when. And the context you have to think about for the private sector, of course, is that the adversary is banging on the door every day. They're working with finite resources, and with the growing prominence of cyber attacks and media reports on cyber attacks, and particularly ransomware attacks, but not only, of course, there's tremendous pressure on these leaders from the C-suite, from the top of the house, from the board of their organizations to focus on preventing those outcomes that are generating headlines and that are crippling their peers or competitors. So in that context, cybersecurity leaders, CISOs and equivalent, have to monitor the evolving risks and the threat landscape, but they're also constantly making choices about priorities and determining the appropriate pace and focus of investments in mitigations and mitigating controls for those risks, and then periodically reassessing. So, if you look at the range of reactions that we're seeing today, and I'll illustrate a couple. So you see organizations, like with any emerging technology, that are very excited, sometimes overexcited, about the potential applications of quantum computing capabilities, not only for cyber, but broadly speaking. And the more that vendors and investors are leaning into those developments, the more I think some organizations get, if I can say so, a bit distracted, frankly, by the possibilities, even though some of those are still some distance in the future, let's say. Another reaction that we see quite commonly, which is sort of equally counterproductive, is you see fear that leads to avoidance or inaction or paralysis, and the concept of Shor's algorithm being implemented and the threat to asymmetric cryptography, to public key cryptography, is almost too big to contemplate or to take action on. So we see many organizations, and frankly, we see a lot of denial, right? This isn't the thing. I mean, frankly, there are luminaries in the field, including people that, cybersecurity luminaries that are widely followed, their blogs and newsletters and all of that, who have very publicly said, this isn't the thing, or this isn't the thing that organizations need to worry about for a long time. Also not necessarily helpful. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you see people who react to the concept of the threat to particularly public key cryptography with panic. So rushing to plan and execute the post-quantum transition, even with all of the unknowns that we still have about, what would be the capabilities available and what that threat will really look like, how it will manifest. So, that tends to lead, or can lead, I should say, to a bit of inefficiency in prioritization and investment. And frankly, I think the biggest risk that I see as an advisor to CISOs is that they lose credibility, and they lose the leadership sponsorship to that they need to sustain over many years to come in order to navigate this transition. And we've heard, I mean, you're all aware, of course, there's tremendous work being done by scientists in many disciplines, including physicists, mathematicians, many others, both on quantum methods and applications for cybersecurity. So, we heard a little bit about quantum key distribution, sometimes referred to as quantum cryptography. There's others, of course, as well, and work on also quantum safe cryptographic algorithms, post-quantum cryptography. So, a tremendous amount of important work being done in those areas. I think that from the private sector point of view, for cybersecurity executives, it's important to monitor those developments, but there are too many unknowns today to be able to plan and foresee all the way to the end of the post-quantum transition. Now, I should say a couple of caveats. I mean, there are some industries or sectors with special considerations. Two scenarios that are common, right? One is protection of highly sensitive data that has a long half-life. So in other words, data that will remain highly sensitive for many years to come, especially when protected by asymmetric keys. So there, the forward secrecy problem can't be ignored. And there seems to be still considerable debate among specialists about how seriously to take the forward secrecy problem, how serious is the threat of harvest now, decrypt later. But it's clear that there are some organizations that need to err on the side of caution, if you like. But many organizations, I think, do the assessment and determine, what, if data that we consider sensitive today is exposed many years in the future, it will have lost a lot of the sensitivity or relevance. It's a hard conclusion, I think, for people to reach, but really with scarce resources, it forces some of those trade-offs. And I think one other, if you like, special consideration in some sectors is the product security challenge, especially with embedded devices that have a long service life. So, you see organizations manufacturing automotive, medical devices, and many situations in which people are putting into service technology that will have a very long service life. And I think they are, quite rightly, there is significant focus on anticipating threats and mitigations that may arise or be needed during the service life of those embedded devices. So I put those a bit to the side. I mean, the last thing, perhaps obvious, but public sector, especially agencies with an intelligence or counterintelligence mission, have a whole different posture here. I think if you take some of those special considerations and put them to the side, and you consider the majority of private sector organizations that remain, really the challenge today is not to go and transform the way that cryptography is managed in the organization per se, but it's to understand what are the real drivers that exist today or that will come in the years to come that will force a cybersecurity leader to take action. And that's not just going to be things like the implementation of the achievement of cryptographically relevant quantum computing capabilities or the implementation of Shor's algorithm. That may also come in the form of regulation, standardization, maybe before regulation, market pressures. And importantly, there are actually business drivers today that encourage organizations to achieve better hygiene, if you like, around the management of their cryptographic assets, almost independent of what happens with quantum computing and the threats to cybersecurity. And I think what we see, the approach that some organizations are taking, I guess the way I'd say it, that I believe is the most balanced, is focusing on steps they can take now that create value in the near term, but that also lay the foundation for a successful post-quantum transition, even despite the unknowns that still exist on what that's going to look like. So, for a lot of organizations, just control over, frankly, key and certificate management, understanding how those are scattered across the applications and infrastructure in an organization, and having a better ability to manage those is a value driver today that is foundational to the post-quantum transition, but that doesn't need to be justified on the basis of the quantum threat alone. And I think that's very significant for many cybersecurity leaders in the private sector to understand that there are steps they can take where there's almost an independent business case, because ineffective management of cryptographic assets is a potential blocker for the digital transformation or the cloud transformation or other things that the business needs to do, or applications that developers need to bring to market, and so forth. And if you like, unblocking or enabling the business more effectively is its own value driver. So, I guess the one other comment I would make is quantum computing is not the first technology development that has threatened existing cryptographic practices. So we've had vulnerabilities identified in cryptographic algorithms. We've had deprecation of algorithms. Many things that have forced private sector organizations to take action in the past. And frankly, many organizations have struggled. If you think about how long it took organizations to deal with SHA-1 certificate remediation, for example. So there's a compelling case, I think, for organizations to focus today on more what many people call crypto agility. I think the term is thrown around so much that it loses a bit of meaning, but I do think that effective management of cryptographic assets and the resilience of being able to adapt to disruptions is a compelling narrative and a compelling business case in the private sector that also positions organizations to prepare for the post-quantum transition. And meanwhile, much more will become clear as these developments unfold about both the threat and also applications of quantum computing methods to cybersecurity and so-called quantum cryptography. So, I think it's a long answer, I think, Lorenzo, but, from our point of view, there's a way for organizations to take steps today that that are defensible priorities that also set them up for success without having to speculate on where these developments go in the years to come, and without necessarily having to be all wrapped up in different timelines. We've seen many different, quite credible researchers who've done tremendous work on understanding the likely timelines, or the likelihood of different timelines, if you like, of the evolution of cryptographically relevant quantum computing capabilities. Michele Mosca's comes to mind, which I think is circulated quite widely, and I think is also something he's updating. But I think that for the private sector, they actually doesn't require them to take a position on that today, or to stake their credibility on a point of view on when they will have to completely replace what they're doing today with asymmetric cryptography. I think it's much more effective for those leaders to focus on the things they can take that produce a measurable return on investment, if you like, in the near term, and to continue to monitor those developments and, frankly, educate their leaders and boards and other stakeholders to better understand the hard choices and investments that will be needed in the years to come.
Okay, Ethan, thank you very much. Now I'd like to give the floor to Pascal Melot, Deputy Head of Unit High Performance Computing Quantum Technology, European Commission, to get the view from the policymaker. In other words, what is the status, what the Commission is doing on that, and also, his view on how policy can help in we have done this analysis also for artificial intelligence, but in general, when there are these new disrupt technology, the issues is it's always the one of avoid the technology trap. In other words, this technology in the short run looks very maybe disruptive, and so we tend maybe to underestimate, underinvest, because we overestimate the negative effect and so of this technology. So in the long run, then we risk not to have the optimal investment because we are afraid to some extent of making mistake because of the negative effect of this new technology. So I will ask Pascal to give his view on what the Commission is doing and how policy can help us in approaching this issue.
Thank you. In the EU and in the European Commission, as you have noticed, we have a unit dedicated to quantum technologies. I'm the deputy of the unit, and we are working on the different pillars of quantum technologies. There's not only a quantum computer and quantum communication, but we work also on simulators and sensors. For the specific case of quantum computer, and as the colleague from Delft said, there are a lot of efforts all over the world in United States, China, Canada, also UK, in the development of this quantum computer. And one of the risks that we see, as explained before, is in fact for the encryption, the classical encryption schema that we are using now. The problem is that, and this was also mentioned, is that we must anticipate this risk because the data can be recorded and then encrypt when the quantum computer is available. So, and in case of, for example, governmental communication with classified document, we are not talking about keeping them safe 2 or 3 years, but more than sometimes 20 years. So who knows where the quantum computer will be in 20 years and what it will be capable of, because most of the time when I talk with experts, we have ideas of these quick calculation that quantum computer can do. And so what are the possibilities that they might do against even a high performance computer. But many experts tell also that they don't even know what exactly a quantum computer will be capable of. It might be quite more than what we are expected. And so to anticipate this, and it was presented with the quantum communication, the good thing is that quantum technologies give us also an answer against the threats of the quantum computer in this domain. And we are developing a project in Europe called EuroQCI, which is a federation of national quantum communication infrastructures with a ground segment and a space segment, complemented by a space segment for the cases where there is a limitation of distances for the technology of quantum key distribution. So we anticipate this risk with this project that we will develop until 2028. These are the points that I can mention. About the investment, there is a study from McKinsey that we asked to perform, and with the European Investment Bank. And the first figures show that Europe is quite behind in terms of lagging behind in terms of investment compared with the eternal United States, which put a lot of money. And if we want also to be in the lead with all the excellent experts that we have in the EU, if we want to be in the lead for the business, because here we talk, it's normal, it's a panel about cybersecurity, but quantum technologies could bring also a lot of business and job development with the capacity of calculation of quantum computer giving advantage to the companies and industries. So there is a lack of investment in Europe in the private sector. We try to put investment, public investment, to attract private investment, but for the moment we are still lagging behind. So in our case in Europe, we are not really thinking about under investment, over investment for the moment. We are more working on initiative to develop these companies, and not really for the first step for startups, but for the second step when they would like to scale up the company, and here investment is missing. So that's our role. And for the specific case of EuroQCI, we expect that this infrastructure that we put public money in will attract then private investors and go to the protection of also the private communications of the private sectors, like banks or other companies.
Okay, Pascal. Now maybe we can open up the discussion. I mean, if you have I don't know, among the three speakers, then maybe if we have a question from the audience. we have a question now from Loretta. Does Europe make a few computers as US and China do, or do we just consume? I don't know if who wants to answer to this question.
I can begin the answer.
Yes.
No, in Europe, we don't consume a computer from US and China. We already have, with the quantum flagship project, we have open SuperQ based on the supraconducting technology. We have also in Austria a computer based on ion trapped, which is in the cloud with around 50 qubits. In Finland, we have the company IQM, which is building a quantum computer. And in the domain of simulator, because simulator, for example, our American friends, they talk about quantum computer, but it's sometimes a simulator also. We still make the difference, but some experts recognize that we shouldn't make this difference. In simulator, I can name, for example, Pascal, a French company developing a simulator. So no, we are not consuming, we are developing our own quantum computers, and this is also based on under the concept of technological sovereignty. But my colleagues here in the panel can complement, because there are other names also that we can.
Okay, we have also a question from Adrián Rodríguez Pérez. Current standardization quantum-resistant encryption system seems to be in the hands of NIST competition only. Is there any attempt to come up with a standardization of this algorithm at the EU level? Maybe, I don't know if Wolfgang won't take this, or both of you, maybe also Pascal.
Yeah, there are certainly attempts, in particular by the European telecommunication standards industry. This has started already, what, 10 years ago or so, Pascal, I think, maybe even more than that. Was a complex procedure, I would say. I think everything about standardization, also certification, which is another very important problem that we have to get organized. I think these things are accelerating right now, but I think there is more to be done, and certainly still something that is in the path of really developing encryption systems, but also smaller, simpler technology like quantum random number generators that are already much more mature and can also be used. The problem is always the standardization, the certification, and then people work around by XORing, by combining a standard key for which is already some standardization, XORing it with a quantum key. So then the system is still as strong as the standard key. So it will satisfy actually requirements for employment, but in fact, it would benefit from the stronger security of quantum encryption, even though we cannot claim standardization right now. Pascal, maybe you have more to add to that. You may know more what is happening right now in Europe.
No, for the quantum resistant, like the NIST competition, sorry, I don't have all the information on that, but about standardization of quantum key distribution, that's something we are setting up now with different members of the private sector and the standardization organization like Sensenelec and ETSI. That's something we are setting up because we need that for a real deployment of quantum communication infrastructure. We will have to go through some standards, and that's why we are pushing. And we must be aware that China is pushing a lot to impose their standards. So that's a subject that we are following very carefully, so that we we don't find ourselves in the situation where we just have to accept and implement their standards because they've made that quite faster than us and perhaps also already selling product. That is not the case now, but we are working on that. Yeah, about standardization of quantum computer, well, I think it's more up to you. I don't know if the questions talks about quantum computer, but I think for quantum computer, standard is a bit more vague what can be done. I remember IBM said something of how to evaluate the capacity of a quantum computer, but I don't think all the community agrees with that. But I leave that to the expert for this specific point.
I'm not an expert in that part either, so maybe we have to postpone
Okay.
to the next year.
Okay.
I might just add one small comment about the question from Adriano Rodriguez Perez about the NIST, what there is besides NIST that's going on there. My understanding is that from US colleagues involved in it is that the output of the NIST competition is expected to then go through the ISO process as well. So to open up to, let's say, a broader audience. So for whatever that's worth, I think it's important to have that context.
Okay, we have a question. It's more policy oriented, but it's a very interesting question from Afonso Ferreira from the CNRS concerning Q computers and cybersecurity. We talk almost always about encryption, but at the end of the day, these are computers to start with. Is the European Commission ensuring that they are built with security by design and privacy by design hardware and software? Pascal.
So security by design for building quantum computer.
Yes.
Yes, that's we have, as mentioned, two different projects in the quantum flagship. One on ion trapped and one on supraconducting. There is also one who started more recently based on semiconductor technology. And it's clear that it's the security by design aspect is taken into account because, as I said, these quantum technology are very sensitive for us with the huge capacity that they have, and it's based it is under the umbrella of the technological sovereignty. So per consequence, the security by design is something we are looking at seriously. But at the same time, it's still a challenge to make a quantum computer work with the manipulation of the qubit, which is not easy. So it's still a huge scientific challenge. So security by design, yes, but first we'll have to make it work also.
Okay, now I have a question I want to ask to all of you. It's I want to go back to this issue of the interplay between cybersecurity and quantum computing. We understood that the biggest issue is this idea that quantum computing can easily break modern cryptography. But we've seen also there is the other side that can make also more secure product to some extent. But my question is, how can a quantum computer power malware attacks? In other words, there is an issue that we have seen also with AI. In AI now there is a process of democratization of AI. In other words, machine learning, the algorithm, also because everything is so is a research, it's open, you know. These algorithms are becoming widespread. It can be used almost by everybody. Think about, for instance, the software to create the voice generated network and so on. But in terms of quantum computing, can we talk about democratization or quantum computing? In other words, you know, this technology requires a huge investment, but at the same time, there are companies that are starting to offer quantum computer services. For instance, Microsoft in 2019 say clearly that it's using as a feature of its Azure cloud quantum computing. So is this is going to have an effect, for instance, in creating more powerful machine learning to create attacks? What is your view on that?
It's a little bit out of my standard work, I think. It's not really clear to me if artificial intelligence will benefit from a quantum computer or if a quantum computer will benefit from artificial intelligence. It could go both ways, and maybe that's also a good thing. One thing that you mentioned was the democratization of quantum computing, which I understand in the sense that at the end everybody has access to a quantum computer. So I will say something that somebody much smarter than me has said many, many years ago about the fact that the world needs only 2 classical computers or 3. That has certainly proven to be wrong. But I think the idea behind that is that these computational machines will be so complex and expensive that not everybody will have one. I think at the time it was more like not everybody will need one. But I think here it's probably fair to say that in the next couple of decades, not everybody will have a quantum computer at home. An interesting thought is about this idea of blind quantum computing, where you can send a computational task to a computer without anybody, not even the computer itself can figure out what it's actually calculating. It's calculating on quantum encrypted data. I think that's a very interesting idea where we may actually be able to benefit from quantum computing for whatever application we are after without needing this very expensive hardware at home. And we can connect to a computer with a simple device that can simply encode qubits into particles of light. I think that's an important possible development that we should have in mind.
Isaac.
I might add, yeah, I agree with that. I might add a more pragmatic and perhaps slightly cynical point of view, which is, from everything we see when we look at, existing threat intelligence and kind of surveys of the existing threat landscape, the capabilities of classical computing are far from exhausted by current cyber attacks. I mean, the majority of cyber attacks today are not that sophisticated, particularly in the computing capabilities that are employed. The attackers, first of all, particularly when it's cybercrime as opposed to, kind of nation state sponsored or actors with more of an intelligence or counterintelligence motive. But the majority of cyber attacks are really a calculation about how to achieve the objective at low cost. And there's still so much low-hanging fruit for the adversary that it seems that it would be considerable amount of time before even classical AI capabilities are widely manifested in cyber attacks. So while I'm not a specialist and certainly wouldn't dispute the possibility that there may be significant advances in AI that are possible as a result of quantum computing, we're far from the point when cyber attacks need such advanced capabilities. And I think that for the foreseeable future, attacks leveraging much more basic capabilities will continue to be successful and will continue to be the focus. And only when our kind of shared infrastructure is much better protected will attackers be forced to adopt more expensive and complex capabilities.
Pascal?
Yes, sorry.
I don't know if you have any reaction to this issue of potential democratization of quantum computing.
Well, I'm not the expert like Wolfgang and Isaac, but for me, the quantum computer is will not look like the computer that we have, the classical computer, I might say, that we use. So democratization, yes, perhaps in the sense that the price will become affordable when in several years, but the quantum computer, as we see it now, will not be able to do all the things that we are doing with a computer that we in 2021. So it will more be dedicated to specific tasks. And as Wolfgang said, it might still be very expensive and in manipulation, etc., perhaps complex. And so it shouldn't be a computer that you will find in your and buy in your supermarket. And I don't think there will be a Black Friday where the quantum computer will be available for 1,000 euros instead of 50 million.
Yeah, no, but
who knows? You know,
yeah,
we are more in anticipation here, science fiction.
yeah,
Perhaps what we are saying today will be completely false in 2050. It's a bit difficult, but for the moment, the analysis say that no, we will. It won't be a computer that you will have on your desk like the ones that we are using now. But some years ago, who said that we would have in our hands a mobile phone which is sometimes more powerful than a quantum, not a quantum, but powerful than some computers. So, you know, let's be very careful with what we announce about democratization.
yeah, no. I was most thinking about, services used maybe through the cloud. Okay, but okay. So we are running out of time. I think it was a very interesting discussion. Unfortunately, we are still missing, let's maybe the more ethical dimension. I know, for instance, it's not a question, just statement. Suppose that we should replicate like the DARPA exercise, machine that, find vulnerabilities and autonomous decide what to do with the power of quantum computing, for instance. What will be the effect? Who is going to control this machine and so on? I think there are some open issues, and definitely, as I mentioned at the beginning, I think at CEPS we will continue our analysis, and probably we will promote an ad hoc task force in the coming months, and I will be very glad to have all of you people that participate to this panel to contribute to this task force. Okay, so thank you very much to all of you, and now it's noon. We'll have the 15 minutes break, and then we will reconvene at 12:15 with the last panel for today on global norms. Okay, thank you very much. So stay with us.
Thanks a
We
lot.
will reconvene at 12:15.
Thanks very much, Lorenzo. Thanks, everyone.
You can hear me, okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Okay. Hi to everybody. Let's. It's 12:15, so we are ready to restart. And now for last session of the summit on global cybersecurity governance, new norm for responsible operation in cyberspace. This session will be chaired by Clara Jordan, Chief Public Policy Officer, Cyber Peace Institute. Clara, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo, and good afternoon, everyone. Let's hope that we've all saved the best for the end. So it's my great pleasure to chair this session. It's a wonderful group, and I think you'll enjoy the conversation. Just as a matter of introduction, I'm Clara Jordan. I'm the Chief Public Policy Officer at the Cyber Peace Institute, which is an organization that spends a fair amount of time to think about the norms of responsible behavior. We're mostly looking at evidence-led accountability, and we're looking at how cyber attacks impact vulnerable populations. But looking at the theme of the conference today, which is building cyber resilience for sustainable post-pandemic recovery, and we're going to talk about the governance and new norms, I think we do have a wonderful panel that is comprised of all the stakeholders that are important in this debate. The past couple of years have been very productive from the norms making, building, and clarifying perspective. There was a UN Open-Ended Working Group report, which was an unprecedented consensus report. Now the discussions around the norms are really discussions of the many, unlike a couple of years ago when there was just a couple of states engaging in this conversation, and more non-state actors such as industry and civil society are part of these conversations. So that's why I'm so pleased to have a great panel today, because it does represent every corner of the multi-stakeholder system we are here to discuss today. So what we will do for the session, I will do a quick introduction of all the panelists. I know you have access to their bios, but I think it's important just to hear a bit what they are and have been working on, because I think it's quite important to set the stage for the conversation, to understand what they worked on, and that's going to sort of color their perspective on the topic. After I introduce them, I will call on them one by one just to give a 2-3 minute opening statement to set the scene with their thoughts on this topic. And they actually have a couple of questions that will continue, hopefully, the conversation today. So without further ado, let me start with the introduction. So the first speaker I will introduce is Mr. Wolfgang Kleinwachter. I hope I did not butcher your name. Who is the Professor Emeritus at the University of Aarhus. He is located in Denmark, but currently traveling. That's why he will likely be joining us by the phone. He's been teaching a master course on Internet Policy and Regulation since 1998. So I think he has a lot of perspective as how these discussions have evolved. He was also a commissioner in the Global Commission on Cyber Stability in Cyberspace, and has been involved on internet governance issues since the early 1990s. He's been member of the different UN working groups, the Internet Governance Forum in ICANN, and contributed as chair, rapporteurs, or an expert in different groups. So he really does bring the perspective, both from the extent of his engagement, both in time and his scope in different organizations. So we look forward to hearing from him in a minute. The second speaker today is Mr. David Herman, who is the EU Cybersecurity and Privacy Director for Huawei, located in Brussels. He's been with the company for quite some time and had the chance to work with them at their headquarters, where he focused on the company's global relations with over 15 international multilateral organizations, such as OECD, UNIDO, UNESCO, the Commonwealth Telecommunication Organizations, UN, and many of its agencies. So he does really have the experience in these sort of global governance issues from the multilateral perspective, but will also bring in his comments perspective of the industry on norms and their implementation. And the next speaker is Veni Markowski, who is based in New York. And I hope, Veni, you've had enough coffee this morning. He's the Vice President of UN Engagement at ICANN. Excuse me. And he is responsible for the relationships with the UN, the agencies in New York, and the permanent missions of the United Nations for ICANN. He has a legal background, as many of us, but he's been really at the forefront of a lot of the sort of internet issues and one of really the internet pioneers. I remember Venny 2013 when I worked at the Atlantic Council with Jay Healy, and Venny was oftentimes called on as one of those who was there at the inception of the internet, the governance and the security issues. So he spent his career in different international organizations and programs. He also advised the Bulgarian government on the highest levels on cybersecurity and digitization issues, and serves in different ways on the boards of ISOC, ICANN, and many other organizations. So very rich background, and also very long background, also seeing the development of governance since the times when we started to talk about internet and its governance. Last but not least, the next speaker is Viktor Staniecki, who is the Deputy Head of Division at the European External Action Service. He's serving in this position now for some time, but previously he worked as the head of cyber sector. And in his diplomatic career, he also spent time in Tokyo as a part of the EU delegation to Japan. He also worked in South Africa as a desk officer for Brazil, and has quite a long diplomatic career focused on these issues. So without further ado, I will ask the speakers to unmute, and we will just go in the order I introduced them. So Wolfgang, the floor is yours for the first 2-3 minutes to sort of set the stage as to where do you see the development of norms, what is that we've achieved, what are sort of the key highlights that we've achieved, and where do you see the conversation going forward? Thank you. I'm not sure if Wolfgang is with us and can hear us. Okay, so we'll just... Sorry,
no,
go ahead.
I sent him a message, but he's not replying. There is a call in his 10. I don't know.
Yeah, I know he's traveling, so he may have a technical issue. So, David, since you were the second one I introduced, I will turn over to you to provide a perspective of the industry, but also from your work in different multilateral fora over more than a decade now. So over to you, David.
Clara, thanks very much indeed. And thanks very much indeed for the invitation to have an exchange of views with you today about international norms in the field of cybersecurity. Actually, at the outset, I was interested in the comments you made about setting the scene, because the reality is you can't decompartmentalize cybersecurity from issues connected to digitization, from issues connected to the economy. All of these matters are interlinked, including in how the European Union and countries across the length and breadth of the world are going to seek to recover from the economic challenges that we face at this time. We all know that the risks from cybersecurity are there, and many reports are carried out on these issues. It's one of the top cybersecurity and data theft are one of the top 10 risks globally for businesses. That's the finding of the World Economic Forum report last year. But I think there's two trends we need to keep an eye on here. Firstly is the trend of digitalization, where all of us know that the process of technological innovation is modernizing how vertical industries are operating, and this is increasing as each hour, as each day, as each week passes. So if we were looking forward, if we're looking into the future in 5 years' time, 8 years' time, 10 years' time, we know that the transport, the health, the manufacturing, the agriculture, the smart cities, financial services sectors are all going to be fully intertwined through the process of digitization. In other words, the need for companies, the full ecosystem, the need for companies, regulators, governments to put in place very strong processes and procedures and technical certified standards in the field of cybersecurity is rising as each day passes. And I think it's fair to say that companies are realizing more and more the importance of putting in place corporate processes to protect IT systems and to protect data assets. And from the perspective of Huawei, evidently we support the need to put in place common, open, transparent technical standards in the area of cybersecurity, standards that can be drawn up by organizations such as ENISA in cooperation with EU member states, or through the work of the ITU or 3GPP or the International Standards Organization, or indeed through the work of the UN Open-Ended Working Group on Cyber. I mean, the process of technological innovation doesn't stop at any defined geographical border. We're all going to have to work on these issues together. A protectionist approach may be not the right term, but we have to work together in a global capacity to strike common norms, common standards based on technical agreed certification is the way forward from our perspective with regard to addressing cybersecurity issues.
Thank you, David. And I turn over now to Venny just for his perspective. But I also would like to hear a bit about, we touched on the standards. And I think standards are a very interesting topic and issue when we talk about operationalizing the norms, how we can think about building something at the standard level that is, in fact, a way to implement the norm. But we can turn to that in the questions down the road. So Venny, from your perspective, what has been where are we today and where we can go as a community? Thank you.
No, thanks. I hope you can hear me. Okay. So it's a very interesting process, actually, when we talk about norms, because clearly everyone is thinking about the United Nations and what's been happening there since the first resolution that was proposed back in '98, in fact. And what has been happening since then, and the development of certain norms upon which the group of governmental experts agreed at some point. And people who are in the business and in the technical community and the average internet users, most of them would not know that there is such a conversation going on at the United Nations. The very fact that ICANN is the only organization that actually has a representative, two right now in New York, and two in Geneva and two in Brussels, to cover these intergovernmental organizations and the European Union, and a dedicated team for government and intergovernmental organization engagement, is a sign that not even in the technical community many understand the importance of this global dialogue on building norms, developing norms, and the achievements, obviously, from the point of view of the businesses or even the technical community, they're not something that can be implemented immediately in the work of our organizations. In fact, these are norms which are dedicated to behavior of state, of all states, and they're not obligatory. So they're relying on the goodwill of the states that they will implement them. But the more interesting question probably is what's next, as you were asking in the beginning. And what's next is actually something that is fascinating, because we have seen how in the last couple of years there is I would call it a renewed push, and I would call it probably an not quite well informed renewed push to move the conversation from how to connect the next, the unconnected 3 billion people, but also how to secure the internet and to make it more stable and resilient and interoperable, etc., to a conversation that used to exist in the, I would say, in the years 2006, 2010, when the International Telecommunications Union, or the ITU, the UN ICT agency, was very much speaking through the Secretary General back then on how the internet governance, the model of internet governance should change from multi-stakeholder model where everyone participates on equal footing to a multilateral one under the umbrella of the ITU. So after about 10 years period in which this conversation kind of found its natural end, now we see a renewed push for such conversation. And I will send you in the chat in a bit a couple of links so people can take a look at the papers that our team produces. They're country-focused papers, but also papers focused on the developments at the UN and at the European Union. And I think people will find them very informative because they combine all the, let's say, statements done by Russia. There is one paper on Russia, there is one on the Netherlands, and all the statements being done at the United Nations with regards to the narrow mission of ICANN, which is, to coordinate the unique identifiers of the internet. So I think that what's coming is probably more exciting and is probably going to make more news. So people will start to understand that something is happening at the UN, at the ITU, and at other UN agencies as well, because the conversation is going at the World Trade Organization. Some of the other agencies are also talking about the internet. So I think people will find a lot happening in the next, I would say, 2 to 4 years.
Thank you, Benny, for that perspective. I think it's been a fascinating, even the issues we focus on, whether it's the next OEWG, whether it's the upcoming negotiation on a UN cybercrime treaty, the work that's been happening here, across the street from me in ITU. And then I think we are collectively missing the bigger picture of how these processes converge. If you think like in 2025, how many processes will sort of come to an end? And are we really thinking about how they are interconnected and what they actually may mean for the future of the internet? I mean, I think those are super interesting questions, perhaps too big to unpack today, but I just want to put that out in the minds of the participants that this is not one forum, one discussion. As you say, it'd be super interesting to hear the trends we see in the statements of different governments, but also the evolution of that institutional setup in discussing the governance. So look forward to the papers and perhaps further thoughts on the convergence. But I understand now from the organizers that Wolfgang is with us on the line. So if that is the case, hi, good afternoon. Please do come in, and I'm not sure if you heard the questions at the beginning, but we're already sort of looking at, well, what's been sort of the highlights of the past sort of couple of years in this normative development, but where we think they will be going, and what are some of the risks and opportunities, to use the overused phrase. But I think Benny highlighted some of the really interesting topics that are coming up, which do present some risk and some opportunities. So over to you, Wolfgang, on that.
Okay, thank you very much. And I really have to apologize. First, I had problem with WebEx because my laptop didn't take it, and now I have a problem with the phone. If you can hear me, that's fine. And I just want to comment on the both statements, which I could hear you, but I was unable to speak. So now it's okay. So my first statement is that really we have to recognize that in the last 20 years, the world has changed. So 20 years ago, internet-related issues were more or less seen as a technical issues with some political implications. So, but what has changed now is that internet-related issues are a political, a geostrategic issue with some technical, with a technical component. So this has also raised or changed the relationship with ICANN. But ICANN was in the spotlight, in the forefront 20 years ago, because it was a big technical issue. So with the limited mandate ICANN has moved now to the sidelines. But as Benny has said, it's very important that the policymakers of today understand what is happening in the background, how the internet functions. And insofar, we need a very new level, a new quality of communication between the policymakers, traditional policymakers, lawmakers, code makers, and the people who manage the technical resource. So based on this, I want to push for two approaches which are needed to get, as you said, the full picture on the road to 2024. The first thing is what you need in future discussions on cybersecurity, what I call the holistic approach. So the internet did not only connect computers, it connected also problems. That means if you discuss security issues, so you have to consider also the economic implications, the human rights implications. So because whatever you do in the field of security, whether you regulate it or you introduce principles, norms, legislation, or whatsoever, so this will have consequences for other related issues. So that means, as we see also from the discussion about, supply chains and all this, so cybersecurity regulations will affect the digital economy. And, if you go to the issues of freedom of expression and privacy, so there is an interrelationship between cybersecurity and human rights issues. So that means whatever you will negotiate in the bodies you have just mentioned, like the new open-ended working group or the new ad hoc committee for cybercrime or whatsoever, and you have to take into consideration the economic and the human rights implications. And the second point I want to raise is you need a multi-stakeholder approach. So while security, in particular the first committee of the UN General Assembly, was primarily and is primarily an intergovernmental affair, so but while governments are the only lawmakers, but they are acting now in a multi-stakeholder environment. They cannot do it without not only understanding the technical environment, so they need also the cooperation with the private sector, they need the cooperation with the civil society, and they need in particular the cooperation with the technical community. That means if the negotiators in these new bodies want to achieve sustainable results, they will achieve this only if they develop a new level of a multi-stakeholder collaboration. These are the two main points I wanted to raise in my opening statement. You have to have a holistic approach and you have to have a multi-stakeholder approach. Back to you, and again, sorry for the problems I had with my participation. Hello? Hello?
Okay, I'm back. Yes,
Yep.
Thank you for that. I couldn't unmute myself. The technology, as much as we love it and how much it enables, it is sometimes challenging. So thank you, Wolfgang, for that perspective. I just want to, before we turn to Victor, to share with us, the efforts the the EU, there we go, sorry, has made in the multilateral fora and on the norms discussions. I want to share very quickly two perspectives. We talked about the multi-stakeholder engagement, and I think now it's a well-recognized in most places sort of need. And I think us as a community, the academia, the industry, the researchers, has to move to talk about, what is our particular contribution to this debate. But to me, this stakeholderism is so important at the times when multilateralism is being challenged, right? We are at the time when all the institutions we've put in place are being continuously challenged. And so really bringing the communities to whom these organizations should serve at the end, even if the governments are the main customers or the main stakeholders, at the end of the day, it is the individual at the end, it is. So I think it's so important to bring that civil society, the industry, the academia, the researchers in, because not only they have the expertise, but ultimately they as individuals will be impacted by the decisions at these levels. So I echo that. And as an institute, we're doing quite a lot of advocacy around that engagement. So Victor, over to you. It took me only 3 agencies to get the EU's name right, for which I apologize.
No.
So Victor, if you could please share with us, I know the EU has been very active as an institution, as a group of states. I think that's where the huge value is. It does represent, you know, so many different countries, and I think it really gives the strength to the statements and initiatives you and others have been propelling. So please share with us, you know, your position on what you've been doing and what are your hopes for the future.
Indeed. Thanks very much, Clara, and it's great thanks as well to the organizers for inviting me to take part in this panel, and it's a great honor to come after such great speakers and co-panelists as well. I think I'll try to weave in a little bit of what has been said, because I think that there were a lot of very important points raised by Wolfgang, by David, and also other speakers. In terms of maybe, you know, I'll zoom out a little bit and take us back to what Clara, what you mentioned in terms of, you know, where the process has started. And indeed, we came a long way since 1998, when the first resolution on the subject of the cybersecurity has been brought in front of the first committee of the and UN General Assembly by the Russian Federation. And the last iteration of these discussions in form of two consensual reports, one of the open-ended working group and one of the UN group of governmental experts that has been adopted earlier this year, is a great success of international community. I mean, you know, and also it's great success in that comes in current difficult times for multilateralism. So I think that this is a great basis to build on. I mean, these reports, of course, you know, are not perfect, but are the best consensus that we could have achieved. And what is the most important part of, from our perspective of these reports, is that they underline the acquis that has been in place there, in terms of 11 norms of responsible state behavior, in terms of applicability of international law, in terms of the importance of confidence building measures, and as well importance of cyber capacity building. And maybe I'll give you a few elements. I mean, we as the European Union and our member states have been very active, not only in discussions, multilateral discussions on these issues, but also on the practical ways forward. And one maybe first element, which I'm pretty sure will come back later on when we will be talking about operationalization of norms, is also our promotion of the program of action, which in our view would be a very concrete mechanism to help member states and states out there to implement in practice all the different acquis that is out there. But also on the we have been very active in other parts, mainly on the confidence building measures. And here we have been working with many regional organizations such as the AREF, ASEAN Regional Forum, Organization of American States, and OSCE, and to a large degree is also with African Union, to make sure that we can learn from each other, from best practices of confidence building measures, because this is how we also translate practically some of the norms agreed. And I think that I will maybe sort of end here. Capacity building. This is absolutely crucial. I think that this is what many of you have mentioned, that this is a cross-border issue. This is not, you know, and also we can only be as strong and as effective as the weakest link of that part. So cyber capacity building, both from the technical perspective, but also policy perspective, is absolutely crucial. And we as the European Union and our member states have been one of the leading partners that engage in building capacity, either through our own programs, and we have Cyber for Death programs, cyber and other financial instruments to help countries, but also through international programs as well. And maybe last thing, I think that I couldn't agree more on the multi-stakeholder approach, importance of that. We have been saying that as the European Union since forever. I still remember being engaged in discussions on the IANA function and ICANN back in 2008 precisely, and then following. But I think that this is even more important nowadays. One of our ambitions is also to make sure that in the next iteration of the open-ended working group, which will be starting soon, we have a broader also representation of multi-stakeholders, not only ECOSOC accredited one, as was the case on the previous occasion, because indeed, as also David mentioned, I mean, industry, for example, is absolutely crucial, and technicians are absolutely crucial to translate many of those decisions. Civil society, as Wolfgang mentioned, needs to bring this bottom-up approach as well on terms of what are the problems out there and how the current discussions and decisions of policymakers translate into a protection of human rights on the ground. And maybe I'll stop here. Thanks, and over to you, Clara.
Yes, thank you, Victor, for that overview. I mean, on a capacity building, I think that's been, there's been so much efforts over the years to focus on the technical capacity building and resilience. But I think in the last couple of years, and I know the External Action Service is supporting some of the efforts, focus on really the capacity building on a policy and diplomatic level. Because I think, we used to have GG with a couple of countries. Now it's an open-ended working group with all the states. But many of them recognize, and we work with a lot of the missions here in Geneva, which say, look, we just don't even have capacity to cover it, let alone understanding the equities, that are on the table when we discuss these issues. So, I think we're coming sort of full circle on what actually means to have a capacity to engage and to protect and to collaborate. And it really goes sort of beyond, technical standards and norms. I have so many questions out of this discussion already, and so little time, as there always is with these groups. So I think what I would like to put forward as a question to you is, I think we're talking about operationalization of the norms. I think there are some discussions that push for more norms, especially for certain sectors. But I think we still have, the important work to do to operationalize the existing ones, and especially, again, not to let everyone else behind who is still struggling with understanding what the norm means, how they can implement it, and how they can actually, really bring it to life. So to put forward new things, I think it could potentially challenge the process and the progress we've made. But what I'd like to do here is talk a bit about what do you think are the practical steps to bring some of those norms to life, especially in these areas we talk about, recovery here at this conference, those areas that can hamper the recovery. So for example, if you think about fight against ransomware, which is seriously impacting economic prosperity, and human life, obviously, or for example, protection of the healthcare sector with its impacts on human life. So where do you think we can make the most progress on the key areas where the lack of that responsible behavior or misunderstanding of the norms or lack of action on norms can sort of be impediment to the recovery? So we can either talk about what can propel the recovery and which norms we should really put in place, or what we should focus on in terms of practical steps to help us, protect the ICTs in a way we can recover. Or what do you think is particularly challenging to put some of those norms, into practice when we are trying to think about, okay, how we think about sort of the long-term recovery, economy, prosperity. So I don't know who wants to take this first, and you can also sort of give your take as to where you're planning to take your work forward.
Can I make a comment? This is Wolfgang.
Please do, yes.
Yeah, I fully agree with your approach that it makes no sense to produce more and more norms. So we have the 11 norms. These are very good norms, and we should concentrate really our work on the implementation of the norms. But before you go to implementation, you have to deepen the understanding what the norms are meaning. So I was member of the Global Commission on Stability in cyberspace, where we also proposed a number of norms. But if you look into one of our key norms, it was the protection of the public core of the internet. So there was this is a further enhancement of the existing norm of not to attack critical infrastructure. So I think this is the basic norm, the protection of the critical infrastructure, and then we have to broaden our understanding what we mean by critical infrastructure. And I think one of the core element of the infrastructure of today is the core functions of the internet. So this is part of the infrastructure. So that is a deepening of the understanding of an existing norm. It's not a new norm. It's a deepening of the understanding of an existing norm. And then we have really to understand what is meant by the public core of the internet. This is the key elements of the internet, like the domain name system, the IP address system, the routing system, is functioning in a neutral way. So, and because after the IANA transition, so this is now managed by the what we call the empowered community. So the broader community where I can play a key role, but there are also other organizations involved. So, and one of the risks what I see is that you try, or that some governments try to politicize this very technical, neutral elements like domain names and IP addresses and the root servers. So I think that you are aware about the proposal of the Russian Federation in the ITU to start a discussion about the need for an intergovernmental treaty for the management of the critical internet resources. So this would result in a very counterproductive development. That means you would politicize a neutral resource which is needed by everybody. So that means to broaden the understanding of the existing norms and to understand better, what is behind the norm where we have a basic agreement, and how then this basic agreement could be implemented on the various layers. The internet is a layered system. I think this is, in my understanding, the heart of the proposed program of action. So the program of action should help by discussions, by enhanced communications, by expert seminars or whatsoever, to deepen this understanding. And so this is very linked to capacity building. So this would be my recommendation for the next steps. It makes no sense, to proliferate norms, to start immediately in the negotiations of a new treaty. So we need a broadening understanding of what we have already. And what we have is not bad. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Wolfgang, for that perspective. Not to make light of the serious issue, I think all our lives would be much easier if we didn't have to operate in a politically difficult and geopolitically difficult environment. And there is a lot of really interesting scholarship done on actually, how the norms evolve in that environment, and how sometimes, norm is actually a reflection of the international law obligation, and how we're trying to really develop the system, and how, we have to walk the talk as individuals and countries and organizations on all those norms. And I don't think it's necessarily the case. So I think oftentimes with our own actions, we are undermining the things we would like to see. So I think these are really difficult conversations. So steering away from the difficult ones, let's talk a bit more concretely on what we think would be really, Victor, maybe I'll turn to you, because you talked about the plan of action and operationalization on capacity building, so I'll turn to you. But Vinny and David, then think about how you can come in, and I'd love to hear, that broader perspective, when you bring together the industry, the standards, how do you see those developments going forward? I think when you highlighted some of the challenges that are coming, but where do we think, what we can operationalize, perhaps, to be able to deal with those challenges down the road. So Victor, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Clara. And I think that I couldn't agree more with Wolfgang in terms of the approach. And indeed, I mean, this is putting aside all the high politics, which I'll not go into as well. I mean, this is very rational approach of as well. We have quite a substantive body of both norms, but also international law. Let's make it work the best as we can. And I think that this is before we spend this energy that is a scarce resource, as you mentioned. By many states, they have one or two people that deal with these issues. If they are going to be engaged in negotiating a new instruments or new norms, they will not be spending that time on thinking about how to implement, how to translate those issues in real life. And I think that this is a point of departure. We have a very good basis to work on, and of course, 20 years, 30 years, the landscape will change, and many things we'll need to revisit. That's a normal part of life, and I think that we are very aware of that and open as well to consider anything new that when the time comes that we need to consider any new additional norms. And in terms of POA, just maybe to give all the colleagues as well a little bit more detail on the program of action, is that this is very also rational instrument in our view that aims at establishing a permanent, inclusive, results-oriented instrument to further international cooperation, because I think that's what we really need in these times as well, and support all the states in the implementation of existing commitments. So the main objectives of the POA will be support tailored capacity building based on states' assessment of their needs. So it's a needs-driven approach, and as well to develop exchanges of best practices and experiences between relevant experts and foster meaningful multi-stakeholder engagement. Since, as I mentioned before, private sector and civil society have also responsibility to contribute to the fight against malicious ICT activities. So this is very, I think, a practical way of how we can translate those high-level and very often non-understandable by technicians discussions into something that is needs-driven and very pragmatic way forward.
Thank you, Super. Venny, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, there is the conversation kind of veered from the norms that we were discussing that the UN group of governmental experts passed with consensus, and also the deliberations at the open-ended working group that took place earlier that finished earlier this year. But I want to make a couple of points, and then I think I mean I really like the contribution by everyone, and I think we have to be aware that, and I can start talking more about this, that the way, and Wolfgang and I have been in the beginning of the whole process, the World Summit on Information Society, when the working group on internet governance was created and a report was published. In the last year, I would say, we're trying to actually explain that there is also a little bit different part of the internet governance, which we call technical internet governance, which is related to the technical underpinnings of the internet. Wolfgang mentioned this a little bit, but he went into the other direction, which is what the Global Commission on Stability in Cyberspace did with their proposals. I do need to mention, though, that as you know, I followed very closely the deliberations at the UN of the OEWG, that the proposal to include the public core of the internet was actually faced with opposition by different member states, and it didn't make it to the final report of the OEWG or the GG. And therefore, that is something that we have to be extra careful, because we actually noticed that in the paper that the link I put in the chat for the Netherlands and the public core, that an idea that comes from one member state and then is being pushed to the intergovernmental organizations, even though it was actually challenged at one of the ICANN meetings where the Global Commission participated, could not necessarily be welcome at the UN level. the UN is a very different organization than the ITU or any of the other intergovernmental organizations, and clearly very, very different from the European Union, which at the end of the day is people consider it more as a country rather than an intergovernmental organization, so to speak. But what's happening at the UN there are very little pieces in the different UN General Assembly committees, and sometimes these groups are talking to each other, but not often. The diplomats that cover those committees are very different. So cybersecurity is discussed by one set of diplomats, cybercrime is discussed by another set of diplomats, and then you have a completely different set of diplomats who are discussing ICT for development, where the World Summit on Information Society review will come in 2025, the so-called WSIS plus 20. And people can search for WSIS plus 10 outcome report, and they will see that this is an update of the Tunis agenda, which was the second World Summit on Information Society meeting in 2005. So there is a lot of complicated and small pieces of the mosaic which form a bigger picture. And the question here is how we don't lose the view on the big picture when we focus on smaller items, be that the public code that Wolfgang mentioned, be that technical internet governance, be that different sets of these norms, like protection of CERT or protection of critical internet infrastructure or cooperation. But you ask also the question, how this can be implemented. So since these are norms which recommend states what they should do, the easiest answer is, well, let the states figure out a way to actually do what they're being asked to do. But also, don't forget that at the end of the day, every cyber incident and every cyber crime, there is a person behind it. And whether this person works formally for a government or is a 14-year-old kid somewhere who wants to make some money by spreading disinformation, for example, and causing big, massive, society issue in a particular country or maybe in many countries, that's something that the law enforcement of all countries should actually engage with. So if there is a country that is allowing cyber criminals to do whatever they want, it doesn't really matter if this is state-sponsored or not state-sponsored, because the end users are suffering the most. You mentioned ransomware, and you mentioned in the same almost sentence healthcare system, because we all know what happened with certain healthcare institutions in the last few years whose systems are suddenly encrypted and they can't use it, and people might die because the computers cannot run their oxygen, So this is an issue where crime should be punished in every country. Clearly, the conversation that is going on, that is starting in January at the United Nations with the draft of the new UN Cybercrime Convention, will be very interesting. And we have seen already that there is a draft text proposed by Russia and then co-sponsored by China. We have seen also that this draft text is not the same as the Budapest Convention, and there are clearly differences. But we have also seen, even in the norms that were already agreed with consensus, that there is a norm about human rights. So this is all a conversation that is happening parallel with lots of organizations involved. But I do want to make one point, because I think Victor mentioned something about the open-ended working group having stakeholders, other stakeholders participate. And he was hoping that not only ECOSOC, organization with consultative status to ECOSOC, will be able to participate in the work of the open-ended working group, which starts in 2 weeks, actually. We have to be aware that, and for the folks on the call, if they don't know, at the United Nations, other stakeholders do not participate on equal footing. This is not the internet governance model or the model that ICANN has or other organizations have. At the UN, other organizations, companies, etc., could come, but they could not be part of the formal process of the General Assembly. They can only be part of an informal process. And for example, in December 2019, there was a meeting which was opened for stakeholders. There were 114 organizations that spoke, including, by the way, Huawei, David, and others. I can, by the way, did not speak, but the meeting finished because it was a 3-day meeting, and then the governments in another setting where the GG, the group of governmental experts, was talking to the OEWG, they just used the fact that there were 114 organizations. Some governments used it to claim that that is a sign that the open-ended working group is a more successful model than the group of governmental experts. And of course, these are two completely different groups. One has 25 experts, yes, proposed by member states, but the other is actually member states themselves, so 193 of them. So it is very tempting, I would say, Victor, for stakeholders to participate, but they have to be aware that once the doors are closed and they are not part of the conversation, their positions could be used any way they don't want.
Yeah, thank you, Vinny. I think those are really, important points. I think we use the multi-stakeholder engagement as a word, but I think we all understand the nuances around what it is, and sometimes just the transparency on the process here, on the discussions on the issues are so important, because then the community can go and self-organize outside those processes, which is already a big, there's already a big plus. And I know there's a lot of governments and a lot of organizations such as the EU who really lead by example as to having those sessions where there is an opportunity at least for discussion. But for that, there has to be transparency and access to the information. Those were really, interesting points, even what you mentioned, Rennie, on the cybercrime treaty. As I mentioned, this is a topic we follow closely. I think that really for us, it's concerning for many different reasons, but if you look at the treaty, the text could be passable, but here and there you have real, it's a real minefield to the issues such as human rights and open internet. And I think that is what is challenging here. That's why the capacity building comes to the place, and that's why the engagement, of other communities comes to place, where we can actually highlight to the states that would otherwise not have the capacity to understand the equities and the landmines, because there's text that's good, but you talked about law enforcement, and I think we all know that we have a lot of work to do. The proposal has so many caveats that basically, you can sort of forget around getting anyone, held accountable. So I think we're talking, I think, all about the same thing, that we need to connect all the dots. I think if we knew how we connect the dots, we would be all winning a Nobel Prize for solving this problem. But I think the good thing here, what I'm hearing, Rennie, is that I think everyone understands what the ingredients are, and I think in their own corner, they're really trying to work on them. But it is it has to be a sustained commitment, both from every government and every institution, that even if we don't have an official process, or the official process is limited in that terms of engagement, the fight for the transparency is so important. David, I'll leave it to you for sort of your last reflection just in a second. But after David sort of finishes his comments and his remarks, I really want to just do one last round, because I do like to end on a positive note, and I really want to sort of hear on sort of your hopes for these processes for 2022. And as Rennie mentioned, there's going to be a lot of processes concluding in 2024, 2025. So what is sort of your hope for the next couple of years? Where would you want really to see the world of norms, engagement, multilateralism, and multi-stakeholderism going? So David, first to you, and then I'll do the last round before we wrap. You're on mute, David.
Okay now? Yeah. No, when we're talking about the debate about operationalizing the norms, we could use another phrase. What are the best practices that could be put in place here that we can learn from one another? And the European Union, we know, of course, has set a global benchmark when it comes to data protection in the field of GDPR. But I was very interested in one of the programs that the European Union is operating called the Digital Europe Program. This is a program that's worth in excess of €5 billion that is allocating funds to deploy technologies connected to AI, high performance computing, and cybersecurity. And only this week, in fact, only yesterday, the European Commission was running a series of training courses in the area of improving cyber and digital skills. And this is really important. I mean, there's a serious global shortage of required talent to work in the field of cybersecurity. And governments are going to have to redress this. In fact, it was Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft, said that it's the greatest challenge facing cybersecurity in the world is not enough people working there, and including the need to improve levels of the number of women working in the area of cybersecurity. So Digital Europe is a good program that I think other governments around the world could start looking at in relation to deploying best practices to promote the importance and the need to put cybersecurity at the top of the agenda in governments and businesses alike. Evidently, it was mentioned before that critical infrastructures have to be protected. The European Union is doing that too through the new NIS 2 directive. Of course, this is a very important piece of legislation. We, of course, as a company, want to see certified open standards there. That gives businesses the certainty they require. Other organizations like GSMA have brought out standards like NISA standards to support industry best practice in the area of 5G, and these may be certified standards that organizations like ENISA could be looking at. But the bottom line here is there's shared responsibility for all the different actors in the chain of the ecosystem to play their part. This requires international collaboration and through fora that have just been referenced. And it was also mentioned about the importance to bring civil society on board. Of course, if the consumers don't trust the products, they're not going to use them. Simple as that. And actually, the word trust hasn't been used yet in this discussion. This is why there has to be a multi-stakeholder approach, bringing businesses, consumers, and civic society together. People have to have maximum 100% trust in the products and services that have a technological bent to them, which of course is all pervasive now. So they're just a few comments I'd like to make. Thank
you, David. Yeah, I think often, that's part of my work is actually to remind so many different decision makers that at the end of the day, it's about the individual at the end of their decision, and that when we are at the UN, we're not having some esoteric conversations. It really is about the future of the individuals, and whether it's human rights or prosperity or security or safety, and now really, your physical safety and your life when we look at sort of ransomware and some of the critical infrastructure attacks. So I think that's I think a good reminder to all of us. And so let's go for the last round, starting with Venny, Victor, and Wolfgang, to sort of what are you hopeful for? What's the positive note where we think about next year and the processes, which a lot of them will conclude or culminate in 2024, 2025. Venny, do you want to kick us off?
I was waiting for Wolfgang because he's on the phone. And,
okay. Yeah, Wolfgang, go ahead. Why don't you start?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I think one of the challenges for the next couple of months is to settle the procedural issues for the multi-stakeholder approach. I think there's a general agreement that we need the involvement of all stakeholders. But the open question is, and as several has mentioned, who should participate and how the interaction should be organized. So there is a general willingness also of the new chair, Ambassador Gafor, to be open, but how is the big problem. And what I've seen is in other organizations that they are working quite effectively with advisory committees. So in ICANN, we have advisory committees for some constituencies. We give advice to the decision-making body. So in the OECD, we have also advisory committees for civil society, for the technical community, for the business sector. So So probably the open-ended working group and also the ad hoc committee for cybercrime would be a benefit to have a more structured dialogue with non-state actors via advisory committees from the industry, from civil society, and the technical community. This would really enhance the United Nations procedural approach, but this could be an innovation in policy making for cybersecurity. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I like practical recommendations, and I know there's actually a lot of coalitions and actually a lot of letters being currently written to the chair around these issues. So it's good to hear these practical recommendations, so we can include those. Benny, now over to you.
Well, the next year will be mainly conversations at the UN, but the whole culmination of all the meetings is coming to 2025. And in our papers, you will see some statements by officials from the Foreign Ministry of the Russian Federation who are basically saying, here is what needs to happen. I mean, I'm obviously paraphrasing, but here is what's going to happen. And I'll tell you their version so that you can kind of have the picture. Next year, there are elections for ITU Secretary General. There is a Russian candidate who is running on the platform of the need for ITU to take over the management of the internet. If that happens, that should happen also by hosting the IGF in Russia in 2025. But 2025 is also the year in which the open-ended working group will finish its work with, or there will be a consensus report, or maybe not. I mean, that's not necessarily that there will be a consensus report. There are also attempts there were proposals from other member states to create other open-ended working groups, including one on data security, which was circulated unofficially, so it's not yet public. So when it's public, we'll see whether it will be there actually filed on the UN system. But also the Cybercrime Convention should be done by 2024. And again, we'll see what happens there. And everything points to the fact that there is certain push by certain member states to reinvent the conversation that the internet is not secure and it needs to be secured and only governments can secure it. That is a fundamental misunderstanding of what the internet is, because most of the governments, when we talk about it, and most of the people actually, if you talk about the internet, they say, oh, that's my Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok. For teenagers, the internet is TikTok, nothing else. So we need to understand, we need to explain, and that's part of the work we do in New York and in Geneva, giving briefings to diplomats and to governmental advisory committee of ICANN. Although the governmental advisory committee know what the internet is, because these are people from the telecommunications ministries mainly and telecom regulators. We need to bring that knowledge to the diplomats so that when there are negotiations behind closed doors, they actually understand what's the difference between the internet, the technical internet governance, and the internet governance, and what does it mean actually to coordinate the domain name system, to coordinate the IP addresses and the protocol parameters, what ICANN does. I will give you just one example. In one of the GG settings, there was an invitation to one of our experts to ask him, is there a possibility to create a standard that will develop attribution? So within the RFCs, within the internet standards, which again are not called standards, they're called requests for comments, is it possible to create a technical standard to make sure that attribution is given, by a standard? And the answer is no, there is no such standard. But most of the questions that I have seen at the United Nations are questions that show that there is a need for really outreach to diplomats to talk to them, and that not necessarily at the UN, but also in capitals. And that's what the global internet community could do by talking to their Ministry of Foreign Affairs and foreign offices, etc., and explain to them how the internet works and what is happening actually on the internet, and that the Facebook of the world is not the internet, that's a service on top of the internet. And to use an analogy, with the phone service, which was popular before the internet, when nobody is talking about the need to protect the telephone services that exist using cables or cordless if we talk about mobile phones. So we need to explain what's the difference. And I think if we explain, then the conversation will be well informed, and they will have no space for making a mistake by providing norms. So, for example, suggesting discussion topics which make it very difficult for the UN to reach consensus.
Thank you, Benny. Lots of food for thought. In the interest of time, Victor, you have 30 seconds to share your positive outlook before we wrap.
Precisely. That's what Clara. That's what I wanted. I agree with many points that Benny made, but I want to take this imagine moment and imagine that, in 2025, I think what we need really is cooperation. And I hope that there will be ingredients out there, through the globalized world, to cooperate, to come together, and to find the best consensual agreement that will work for everybody. And I think that's what I hope for, both for the open-ended working group and the POA. I hope as well the outcome of the discussions on cybercrime convention will be taking as a basis Budapest Convention and moving in the right direction. And there's also, my last hope is going to be that there is going to be continued or even enhanced investment in cyber capacity building, because that's what will create this basis of better understanding between stakeholders, stakeholders in all the different processes. So maybe I'll stop here with my imagine and hope for the best, but I will be prepared, of course, for all the other options along the way.
Great, thank you for your contribution. I think there was a lot really of good ideas here that I hope we can capture and spread them with our communities. Thank you to all of those who stayed on with us. Apologies for running over, but how we could not with this kind of group. So for my part, this is it. Lorenzo, I'm turning it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Clara, on the panel. It was a great panel. And again, we have no time for real conclusion. I just want to make a comment. This Cyber Summit today has been very rich in content, but definitely I think that there is one idea that is gaining momentum also after this panel, that, when we talk about cybersecurity, market forces are not enough, to create the right incentive for private sector, public organization, individual, not to handle, to manage the digital risk. And so policy has a great role to play. And for us, for CEPS, this is our core business. And so it's extremely important that. And so, we have heard also in the last panel that we have already good norms, need to be make more operational. So the basic message now, walk the talk, okay? I would like to thank all the participants, all the speakers, and our sponsors to make this event possible. Particular thanks also to Carolina Polito, Francesca Cecchin from CEPS. They have been in the background offering the technical support to this event. Stay tuned with all the activity of CEPS on our website. Thank you very much again, and I hope that you enjoy your lunch. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Carolina.